What do you do when the man you love turns into the very thing that holds you back? Scarlett had always relied on her father, who sacrificed everything for her college dreams. But when he unexpectedly passed away, her world shattered and her college hopes faded. Enter Bryce, a charming fellow student who offered her the comfort she needed. But soon, their once promising future became a complicated tangle of broken promises and unspoken resentment. Scarlett was left to carry the weight of their life together, all while trying to hold on to a dream that Bryce didn't value. Stay tuned to see Scarlett's journey unfold, and don't forget to subscribe for more. I'm Scarlett. I've had my share of rough patches, but who hasn't, right? My dad was my rock, my everything, ever since Mom passed away when I was just a little thing. It was always the two of us against the world. He'd stress the importance of education, sacrificing everything he had to fund my college dreams. "You're going to make it, kiddo," he'd assure me with a wink, even as he dropped more coins into our battered college fund jar. I believed him. More than that, I believed in us. After high school, I enrolled at the local community college, determined to make a name for myself in investment management. That's where I met Bryce. He was part of my cohort charming, with a scruffy, just-rolled-out-of-bed look that somehow worked wonders on me. We clicked instantly, stealing glances during lectures and sharing jokes over lukewarm cafeteria coffee. Then the ground beneath me shattered. Dad passed away unexpectedly, no warning, no goodbyes. And just like that, our world flipped. The college fund, once a beacon of hope, was nothing more than a dream. With Dad gone, I wasn't just missing him and his wisdom. I was also staring down the harsh reality that my college days were numbered. I scraped through my first year on remnants and grit, but as the money dried up, so did my future. I had to drop out. Dad had left me the apartment, a small 3-bedroom in a worn-down part of town. It wasn't much, but it was home. Bryce first came over one chilly evening, hands stuffed in the pockets of his faded jeans. "You live here alone, Scarlett?" he asked, his eyes scanning the room where the wallpaper peeled gently at the corners. "Yeah, just me now," I replied, trying to smooth down a particularly rebellious strip of wallpaper. "It's not much, but it's what I've got." He watched me for a moment, then stepped closer, taking my hands in his. "Let's get married, Scarlett. I want to take care of you. Let's start our life right here." It was sudden, sure, but nothing in my life had ever been planned out. So why start now? "Okay, Bryce," I said, and somehow it felt right. We didn't wait long. The wedding was as modest as they come, held at the city hall with a couple of friends as witnesses. Bryce's parents didn't show up. They'd never approved of me. "Too plain," they whispered, thinking I couldn't hear. None of us acknowledged it, but Bryce squeezed my hand and whispered back, "I love you. That's all that matters." After the ceremony, we walked back to our apartment, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Bryce cracked open a bottle of the cheapest champagne the corner store had to offer, pouring us each a trembling glass. "To us," he toasted, lifting his glass. "To us," I echoed, the champagne fizzing on my tongue, tasting like hope and new beginnings. Chapter 2. Promises Made. Bryce and I had made a deal. He'd focus on his studies, and I'd keep the bills paid. Once he finished college, it would be my turn to chase the degree I had put on hold when life became too heavy. Simple, right? At least, that's what I thought. But nothing is ever that simple. I worked 2 jobs. By day, I was a cashier at a grocery store, dealing with endless lines and irate shoppers. By night, I switched to my waitress gig at a local diner, serving greasy burgers and lukewarm coffee to truck drivers and late-night drifters. It was exhausting, but I powered through, my mind set on the dream of walking back through those college doors. Bryce, on the other hand, was buried in his textbooks, or so he claimed. But his demands grew right along with his studies. "Scarlett, when's dinner? I can't keep eating this fast food crap," he'd complain as soon as I dragged myself through the door. "I need something decent, like Mom used to make." I'd bite back the anger, my body heavy with exhaustion. "Maybe learn to cook it yourself, Bryce. I'm not your mom." His face would harden, shutting down like a door slamming shut. "I'm studying to make something of myself. Least you could do is keep the house decent." His words always hit deeper than I wanted to admit, stoking a fire in my chest that I had to swallow. The retort sat heavy on my tongue, but I held it in, afraid of the crack it might cause in the fragile deal we had. Bryce's parents were no help. Educated, polished, a stark contrast to my high school diploma and diner-stained uniform. They barely acknowledged me, and when they did, it was with a backhanded compliment or thinly veiled critique. "You'd understand this if you'd finished your education, dear," Bryce's mother would say, sipping her tea, peering over the top of her glasses like I wasn't even in the room. Bryce didn't defend me. He simply nodded along, soaking up their words like they were gospel. More and more, he spent nights there, escaping our cramped apartment and the weight of responsibilities that hung in the air. One evening, as I scrubbed grease from under my nails at the diner, Bryce dropped another bomb. "I'm staying at my parents' tonight. Need a real study environment and a good night's sleep." I slammed the bathroom cabinet harder than I meant to. "Fine. Do what you have to do." The words stung, laced with everything I couldn't say. As days bled into months, I found myself slipping into a mechanical routine, zoning out to the steady beat of my jobs: scan, smile, serve, clean. It was a blur, a robot moving through the motions. One particularly grueling night, I came home to an empty apartment. No Bryce. No apologies. Just a note. "Gone to study. Make sure dinner's ready, Bryce Oro." I crumpled the note in my hand, the paper cutting into my palm. Alone in the dim kitchen light, I allowed myself a moment to really feel it all. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the rage bubbling under the surface. I leaned against the counter, eyes closed, and a tear escaped despite my best efforts. Then the day came. Bryce graduated. He landed a job almost immediately at a prestigious company. The news lifted a weight off both of us, or at least I thought it would. His new job came with a paycheck that felt like a lottery win compared to my nightly tips. I remember sitting across from him at our small kitchen table, excitement stirring in my chest. "With your new job, I was thinking maybe I could cut back on work and look into programs, start picking up where I left off," I said, trying to keep the tremble of hope out of my voice. Bryce didn't even look up from his plate. "Scarlett, we can't afford that. Every penny has to be accounted for, and with the way things are, you know how tight the budget is." His fork clattered against the plate, a sharp sound that matched the bite in his words. I leaned back, my heart sinking but not completely defeated. I could keep one job, just the day shifts. We'd still have a steady income, and I could manage night classes. He shook his head, dismissing me with a firm tone. "Just forget about college, Scarlett. We need stability, not more debts. It's not practical." The conversation ended there, but the argument continued in my head for days after. Before I could press the issue further, I found out I was pregnant. Our daughter Dakota became my new priority, and college faded into the background. A dream dissolved. Raising Dakota was a joy, but it was also another chain tying me to routines and responsibilities I hadn't chosen alone. I continued working at the grocery store, my dreams shelved like the products I stocked. Bryce's criticisms didn't stop with my shelved education. They seeped into my parenting. "You're not doing it right, Scarlett. She needs to learn proper manners, not whatever it is you're trying to teach her," Bryce would say, barely looking up from his phone. I remember holding Dakota close, whispering promises to her that I'd begun to doubt I could keep. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." As Dakota grew, Bryce's parents became more involved, their influence overshadowing mine. They paid for a fancy preschool, and every school event was an exhibition of their grandparental pride. One evening, Bryce calmly explained a new rule. "Scarlett, it's best if you don't come to the school events. The teachers, they have a certain expectation of family. We can't ruin Dakota's opportunities." I felt the sting of those words, a slap dressed up as paternal concern. So what am I supposed to do? Just stay home and pretend I don't have a daughter who's growing up, learning things I'm not teaching her, becoming someone I barely know? "It's for the best," was all he said, his indifference the final nail in the coffin of our once shared dreams. The years twisted along, and Bryce's words had weight, not the kind that anchors you in safety, but the kind that pulls you under. His sharp commands to our daughter Dakota left marks, teaching her the lessons of disrespect and disdain toward me, her mother. Scarlett, don't bother telling her what to do. She listens to me, not you. It's for her own good, Bryce snapped one evening when I suggested Dakota might set the table. In front of Dakota, his words were always like this. I watched, heart sinking, as my little girl's eyes hardened to match her father's. You don't know anything, Mom. Dakota would toss at me when I asked for help around the house. Her tone mimicked her father's, each word a barb. I tried to reach her, to bridge the widening gap with mother-daughter chats, but she only pulled further away, retreating to a world where I couldn't follow, a world painted by Bryce and his parents. One humiliating afternoon brought everything painfully into focus. Dakota had friends over, laughter and light voices echoing down the hallway of our home. I was cleaning when I bumped into them in the hall. Dakota froze, her eyes darting between me and her friends. I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron, about to say hello, but before the words could form, Dakota cut in. Oh, this is just our housekeeper. Her friends nodded, barely giving me a second glance as they shuffled past into Dakota's immaculately kept room, off limits to the likes of me. The door clicked shut, and the muffled bursts of teenage giggles were like needles to my chest. I retreated to the kitchen, sinking against the fridge as tears betrayed my resolve not to let this break me. I was her mother, not some dismissed servant in my own home. That evening, I confronted Bryce, my voice trembling with the weight of my frustration. How can you let her, our daughter, treat me like this? Today, she called me the housekeeper, Bryce, in our own home. Bryce didn't even look up from his paper. Maybe if you didn't look the part, she'd respect you more. You're always cleaning, always in those rags. What do you expect? His words hit me like a slap, their cruelty slicing through the fragile defenses I had left. I'm trying, Bryce. I'm trying to make this a home. But you and your parents, you're teaching her to hate me. He scoffed, folding his newspaper with exaggerated precision. Scarlett, you need to stop being so sensitive. She's growing up in a different world than you did. She needs to fit in. Nights became restless, my mind spiraling with thoughts of Bryce's emotional distance, the cruel indifference of his parents, and now, Dakota's rejection. The picture was stark. I was an outsider in my own life, my role reduced to that of a silent provider unseen and unappreciated. As I watched Dakota grow into a teenager, her embarrassment of me became more pronounced. The sharp remarks about my outdated clothes, my simple manners, they cut deeper each time, especially when they echoed Bryce's words. She was ashamed to be seen with me, her mother who had sacrificed everything, only to be rendered invisible. Turning 37 wasn't supposed to be a milestone, but I had hoped it would be a turning point, a sign of something better, something kinder. With a heart full of tentative hope, I booked a table at a nice restaurant downtown. Just a small celebration for me, Bryce, and Dakota. Nothing extravagant, but maybe, just maybe, it would bring us back together, if only for a night. I got home from work, my spirits lifted by the thought of a quiet dinner with my family. But when I walked into the apartment, it was too quiet, too still. Bryce and Dakota were sitting in the living room, their eyes glued to the TV, their faces hard, like they were bracing for bad news. Hey, I've got a surprise! I said, trying to sound upbeat, pushing cheerfulness into the edges of my exhaustion. I booked us a table at Marcello's for dinner to celebrate my birthday. Just the three of us. Bryce turned off the TV and looked at me, an eyebrow raised, a smirk pulling at the corner of his lips. Scarlett, seriously? You think we want to go out and celebrate with you? A dropout? What would we even talk about? His words, casual yet venomous, cut deep, his smirk twisting into a sneer. Yeah, Mom, it's kind of embarrassing. You wouldn't even know which fork to use. Dakota chimed in, her voice a mirror of Bryce's disdain. I felt my face flush, the sting of their words like a slap. I just thought we could be a family for tonight. Bryce laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. A family with you making a fool of yourself? No thanks. He stood up, walked over to his briefcase and pulled out an envelope, tossing it onto the coffee table with a flourish. Confused, I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was a divorce application. This is your gift? Yeah, consider yourself free from us. We're done, Scarlett. I'm taking Dakota and we're moving out. You can keep this place." His words were cold, calculated. Dakota nodded, standing up to join him. "I'd rather live with Dad. I can't be seen with you, Mom. It's just too embarrassing." They packed their things with chilling efficiency. I stood frozen, watching my world disintegrate. It wasn't just the physical dismantling of our lives, it was the last shred of any affection, any pretense of a relationship, disappearing. They left without a goodbye. The door clicked shut behind them, its sound echoing in the empty apartment like a gunshot. That burning resolve led me back to the doors of the college I had left years ago. I enrolled again, older than most of my classmates and with a fierceness in me that only life's hard knocks can bestow. I hired tutors, spending evenings grappling with investment theories and financial models, my eyes blurring from the strain. Social media was a minefield, though. Every so often, a photo of Bryce, Dakota, and that woman, Bryce's new partner, would pop up. They looked happy, carefree, living it up in some swanky downtown apartment that screamed luxury. The sting of seeing them so blissful while I was over here piecing myself back together was a sharp one, but instead of letting it drag me down, I used it as fuel. Each picture, each post pushed me harder. I channeled my anger, my hurt, into my studies, turning bitterness into a motivator. Graduation day came, and I was a different woman from the one who had started. "You've got what it takes, Scarlett. Don't let anyone tell you differently," my favorite professor, Dat Henson, told me during our final meeting, his words a balm to the raw edges of my pride. With his recommendation, I landed a position at a respected firm, stepping into the world of finance with a determination to rise. The corporate world was another battlefield, but one I was now well equipped to navigate. I started as just another employee, but not for long. Within 3 years, I climbed from the ground floor to the department head, my name on an office door, my decisions shaping the company's future. Alongside my career, I revamped my life. I traded my old battered car for something sleek and new, something that hummed under my touch like a promise. My apartment followed, from modest to modern, a high-rise with views of the city that twinkled like the stars I was reaching for. Shopping for new clothes wasn't just about style, it was about armor. Each piece, whether a sharp suit or a sleek dress, was chosen to project the new me, the competent, capable businesswoman. My hair, once always pulled back in a practical ponytail, now fell in stylish waves or was pinned up in chic designs that said I cared about every detail. Only my closest friends knew the extent of my transformation. "You're doing what you were meant to do, Scarlett. It's like you finally found your stage," my friend Tiffany told me over coffee one day, her eyes wide as she took in the changes. "Yeah, I guess I have," I said, sipping my espresso. Bryce and Dakota, and all the pain associated with them, faded into the background, becoming just a part of my story, not the defining chapter. There I was, browsing job listings late one night, when I stumbled across an opening that made my heart skip a beat. A department head position at none other than the company where my ex-husband Bryce worked. I applied, half out of a deep-seated need to prove myself, half out of the sheer audacity of it all. The interview was the next week. I walked in with the kind of confidence that comes from having nothing to lose and everything to prove. The panel of 3 interviewers was engaged, impressed by my insights on everything from market trends to financial strategies. By the end of the meeting, they were genuinely excited about what I could bring to the table. "Well, Scarlett, I must say, it's refreshing to see such a clear vision and detailed knowledge. We'd be lucky to have you on board," the senior interviewer said, his smile genuine as he looked at me. "Thank you. I'm ready to hit the ground running," I replied, my tone steady, the fire in my chest burning brighter than ever. My first day felt like a scene out of a movie. As I was introduced to my new team, the room erupted into polite applause, and the smiles felt warm enough to convince anyone they were genuine. That is, until Bryce stepped into view. The shock on his face was priceless. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, eyes wide, mouth slightly agape. Mr. Reynolds, the head of the company, seemed rather entertained by the scene. With a friendly clap on my shoulder, he announced, "Everyone, I expect you'll give Scarlett all the support she needs. She comes highly recommended, and I believe she'll lead this department to new heights." Bryce's reaction was far from graceful. As the room began to clear, he stormed over to Mr. Reynolds, his voice low but laced with anger. "I applied for this position. Why did she get it? What does she have that I don't?" Mr. Reynolds looked between the two of us, then raised an eyebrow. "Bryce, the decision was based purely on merit. Scarlett's qualifications and vision for the department far exceed what you've shown so far. There's a lot you could learn from her." "Learn from her? This is a joke, right?" Bryce scoffed, his voice rising in disbelief. "No joke, Bryce," Mr. Reynolds replied coolly. "I suggest you adjust your attitude and focus on your own responsibilities." Humiliated, Bryce did something I didn't expect. He threw his ID badge down onto the table, muttered something about a stupid boss, and stormed out. Mr. Reynolds sighed, shaking his head as he watched Bryce disappear. "Sorry about that, Scarlett. I'll handle it from here. Why don't you get started with your team?" I nodded, a small but satisfied smile tugging at the corners of my mouth as I watched Bryce storm off. The sound of his furious footsteps was music to my ears. Later, I overheard Mr. Reynolds on the phone. "Yes, he resigned. No, I can't give him a positive recommendation. Not after this." The rest of the day flew by in a blur of introductions and planning sessions, but one thought kept running through my mind. Justice had been served. Bryce had underestimated me just like he always had. But this time, I'd come out on top. After Bryce stormed out, his career unraveled faster than I could have imagined. Rumors floated back to me through mutual acquaintances, those eager to spill the details that his latest mistress had kicked him and Dakota out of her plush apartment. Desperate, they had no choice but to move back in with Bryce's parents. I couldn't help but think how the mighty had fallen. It wasn't long before Dakota showed up at my door. She whistled low as she walked in. "Wow, Mom, you really upgraded, huh? Guess dumping Dad worked out for you." Her tone was light, but there was a sharp edge to it that put me on guard. "Dakota, what brings you here?" I asked, already sensing what was coming. She sauntered in, making herself comfortable on my plush sofa as if she owned the place. "Well, things are tight at Grandpa's, and I thought, you're rich, well-dressed, and educated now. Maybe I could move in here, but I'd need a decent allowance, obviously." I took a long look at her, really looked at her, and saw Bryce's influence woven into her every word and gesture. It hurt, but it also brought a clarity that I couldn't ignore. "Dakota, I think you should leave. I'm not going to be used like this, not by you, not by anyone." Her face crumpled into tears, but they didn't have the same effect on me anymore. When her tears failed to move me, her temper flared. "You're just selfish, just like you always were," she shouted as she stormed out, her parting words stinging in the stillness of my apartment. News came back to me over the next few weeks. Bryce had started drinking to numb the blow to his ego, while Dakota moved to another city, perhaps in search of the independence she so desperately craved. As for me, my life had found its rhythm one of success, peace, and new beginnings. I met Michael, a colleague whose kindness and quiet strength were everything Bryce had never been. Over time, our friendship blossomed into love, and we married in a small, joyful ceremony surrounded by those who truly cared for us. Looking back on everything, I realized how far I had come. I had lost a family only to find myself, and in doing so, gained the chance for a life and love that were real and fulfilling. Looking ahead, I felt more than ready for whatever came next. I had not only survived, I had thrived, and now my narrative was one of triumph, crafted entirely by me. What do you do when the people who should love and support you, the ones you've given everything for, turn their backs when you need them the most? Scarlett spent years giving, sacrificing, and hoping that love and loyalty would eventually be enough to fix the broken pieces of her life. She worked tirelessly to support her family, put her dreams on hold, and believed in the future Bryce promised. But when the reality of their relationship hit, when she realized she was just a resource in Bryce's eyes, everything changed. Even when her dreams of education and a better life were crushed by his cold indifference, she kept trying. But when Bryce's betrayal reached its peak, when he mocked her dreams, rejected her attempts to rebuild, and prioritized his ego over their daughter's well-being, it was the final straw. Scarlett could have let their cruelty continue, but instead she chose herself. She didn't just survive, she thrived. She rose above the manipulation, the rejection, and the heartbreak. So here's the question. Would you have stayed or walked away just like Scarlett did? How far would you go to reclaim your life and your happiness? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you found this story empowering, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories of strength and resilience.
Greg, this is the last time you'll open our home to strangers without asking me. I dropped my bag on the kitchen counter, eyes blazing at the scene before me. Come on, it's just Rob. He's like a brother. Greg looked up from his beer, a lazy grin plastered on his face. You know how my day was. I just wanted peace tonight. My tone wasn't just firm, it was a warning. Rob leaned back on the couch, clearly sensing the tension, but choosing to stay silent. He sipped on his beer, eyes flicking between Greg and me. It's not a big deal, Meredith. It's not like I threw a party, Greg chuckled. No, I said, crossing my arms, but it's the principle, respecting each other's space. Greg sighed, standing up and walking over to the fridge. He grabbed another beer, deliberately ignoring my feelings. My blood boiled hotter. This isn't the first time, Greg. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to control my anger. I was really looking forward to my show tonight. Greg popped open the beer, avoiding eye contact. You can still watch it. I looked at the clock, knowing the episode had already started. And how am I supposed to focus with you two laughing and chatting? Greg still didn't get it. Or maybe he didn't want to. Rob's here for one night. Chill out. Rob, sensing a storm brewing, finally spoke. Maybe I should leave. No, Rob, I said sharply, not taking my eyes off Greg. You're here now. Let's just get through it. Greg shrugged and took a lazy swig of his beer. See? No harm done. I seethed as I walked past them, heading to the bedroom. I couldn't deal with this again. It wasn't about Rob or anyone specific. It was about respect, something Greg seemed to lack when it came to our shared space. I closed the door behind me and sunk onto the bed. Turning on the TV, the familiar intro to my true crime show filled the room, but my mind was elsewhere. Greg's disregard wasn't new. This pattern had been going on for months. 10 minutes into the episode, Greg knocked on the door and entered before I could respond. Meredith, seriously? Let's not fight over this. I muted the TV, frustration boiling over. Greg, it's not about Rob. It's about you not taking my feelings seriously. Can't you see that? He gave a bad imitation of a remorseful look and sat down next to me. I guess I didn't think it was that big of a deal. You didn't think, I repeated, voice trembling not with sadness but with sheer anger. That's the whole problem. This is our home. You can't just invite people over without asking. Greg stayed silent. I continued, not letting him off the hook. I need you to understand how much this matters to me. He finally met my eyes, a flicker of realization but also resistance. All right, I get it. I'll ask next time. The way he said it, I wasn't convinced. It felt like a placation, a way to end the argument for now. Promise me, I demanded. Promise you'll respect our space. Yeah, he nodded, but the nonchalance in his eyes worried me. Sure. I watched him leave the room, the door closing with a quiet click. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing this issue was far from over. It was about more than just friends and unexpected visits. It was about respect, and that was something Greg seemed to have a hard time grasping. As the muted TV flickered shadows on the walls, I realized the real struggle had just begun. The next morning, I woke up early, the weight of yesterday still heavy on my mind. Greg was snoring lightly next to me, oblivious to the turmoil he had caused. I didn't want to start the day with more arguments, but I knew that we needed to have a real conversation about last night. I got dressed and went downstairs, choosing to wait for Greg to wake up. I busied myself with making coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen and providing some comfort. About an hour later, Greg finally stumbled into the kitchen, scratching his head and yawning. Morning, he mumbled. I didn't respond immediately, focusing instead on pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Finally, I turned to him. We need to talk. Greg looked at me with a hint of annoyance. About what? Rob's gone now. Can't we just let it go? No, Greg, we can't just let it go. I handed him a mug, my eyes hard. You keep inviting people over without asking me? Last night was just another example of you not respecting my space. He sighed dramatically. You're blowing this out of proportion, Meredith. Am I? I challenged, setting my mug down with a thud. Every time this happens, you brush it off like it's nothing. But it's not nothing to me. What do you want me to do? Start sending you calendar invites? Greg scoffed. I want you to think about me before making decisions that affect both of us. Is that too much to ask? Greg rolled his eyes. You know what your problem is? You're too rigid. You need to relax. Life isn't just about schedules and rules. I felt my fists clench. You're missing the point. This is about respect, Greg. Respect for our home and for each other. I'm not asking for much. He took a sip of his coffee, avoiding my eyes. I'll try to remember next time, all right? Can we drop it now? I didn't believe him. His dismissive tone told me all I needed to know. This isn't the first time this has happened, Greg. It's becoming a pattern, and it's not just about last night. There have been plenty of other times. I paused, expecting him to argue, but he stayed silent. Emboldened, I continued, every time you do this, it makes me feel like you don't care about my needs, like I'm invisible. Greg finally looked up, irritation clear on his face. Are you seriously going to make this into a big deal? It was one night, Meredith. I shook my head, tears of frustration welling up. That's exactly it. You always think it's just one night, one small thing, but those small things keep piling up. He set his mug down more forcefully than necessary. Fine, from now on, I'll ask. Happy? No, because I don't believe you mean it, I replied, voice trembling but firm. I need you to understand that this is serious. If you keep ignoring my feelings, this won't work. Greg stared at me, seemingly taken aback by my ultimatum. You're really serious, aren't you? Yes, Greg. I am. I turned away, needing to get some distance. Think about what I've said. As I walked out of the kitchen, I knew that this wasn't the end of our argument, but at least I had made it clear that things needed to change. I came home from work later that week, hoping for a quiet evening, but the sound of laughter hit me as soon as I opened the door. Greg was sitting in the living room with two of his friends, beers on the coffee table, the TV blaring. Hey, you're home, Greg said, barely looking up. I forced a smile, trying to hide my frustration. I see we have more guests. One of his friends, Kevin, nodded at me. Hey, Meredith. Greg said it was cool to come over. I gritted my teeth, shooting a look at Greg. Can I talk to you in the kitchen for a second? Greg sighed but followed me. Once we were out of earshot, I turned to him. What did we just talk about last week? He shrugged, clearly annoyed. What now? I asked you to inform me before inviting people over. You promised, Greg. I forgot. It's not a big deal, he said, crossing his arms defensively. It is a big deal to me, I said, my voice rising. You keep ignoring my feelings. It's like you don't even care. He rolled his eyes. You're overreacting, Meredith. We're just hanging out. No, I'm not overreacting. You keep doing this, and it's disrespectful. I need peace when I come home. Greg leaned against the counter, shaking his head. You're acting like a control freak. Lighten up. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. This isn't about control. It's about respect. This is our home. Both of us need a say. Whatever, he muttered, already walking back to his friends. I stood there, feeling the sting of his words. This wasn't going anywhere. I knew then that Greg had no intention of changing. The realization settled heavily in my chest. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while the muffled sounds of their laughter and chatter seeped through the walls. It was hopeless. Greg didn't care about my needs or the impact of his actions on our relationship. As the night dragged on, my resolve hardened. If he wouldn't respect our space, I would make sure to reclaim it myself. The following morning, Greg was already up and about, seemingly oblivious to the argument from the night before. I found him in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone. We need to talk, I said, stepping in. Again? Greg sighed, not even looking up. Yes, again. Because things haven't changed. You keep dismissing me, Greg, and it's not okay. He finally looked up, irritation evident. What do you want from me, Meredith? I said I'd try to remember. Can you just drop it? No, I can't just drop it. If you can't respect this one simple request, what else won't you respect? Greg threw his hands up. Fine. You want respect? Respect works both ways. Stop nagging me about every little thing. I took a step back, hurt by his outburst. I'm not nagging. I'm asking for basic consideration. Greg scoffed. You know what? Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe that's the problem. I felt a lump in my throat, but pushed it down. Maybe, but that doesn't excuse your behavior. He stared at me, unyielding. I'll do better. This conversation is over. But as he stormed out, I knew it wasn't. This was far from over. Respect wasn't something you demanded, it was earned. And if Greg couldn't see that, then I needed to take steps to protect myself and my peace. There was no turning back now. Greg had shown his true colors, and it was time for me to act. The days moved forward in an uncomfortable truce. Greg seemed more irritable, his attitude flaring up without warning. I, on the other hand, sank deeper into planning. The next incident had to be handled decisively. One evening after work, I decided to put my foot down. "Greg, we need to talk," I said as he lounged on the couch, aimlessly flipping through channels. He huffed, but muted the TV. "What is it this time?" I sat down across from him, eyes unwavering. "No more uninvited guests without informing me first." Greg smirked, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Sure. I'll send out a notification next time," he joked. I leaned forward, seriousness radiating from me. "I mean it, Greg, this is non-negotiable. We are in this together. Respect my wishes or we will have a serious problem." He gave a nonchalant shrug. "Fine. No more surprises. Happy now? You promise?" I pressed. Yeah, I promise," he said, waving me off. The following week, the atmosphere felt lighter initially. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally understood. But deep down, I remained skeptical. Friday came, and as soon as I walked through the door, the sound of loud music and laughter greeted me. My heart sank. "Greg!" I shouted over the noise. He sauntered over, a drink in his hand, smiling like he owned the place. "Hey, babe, welcome home. Great timing." I glared at him, fury building. "What is this, Greg? We talked about this." "It's just a small get-together," he said, as if it explained everything. Don't be such a buzzkill." "Small get-together? There are at least 10 people here. This isn't what we agreed on," I said, my voice trembling with anger. Greg took a sip of his drink, unbothered. "Relax, Meredith. It's the weekend. Just have a drink and join us." I shook my head, feeling the last straw break. "This is it, Greg. I can't take this anymore." He laughed, his tone mocking. Don't be dramatic. It's just a party." I turned on my heel and stormed out, heading straight to our bedroom. As the door shut behind me, I picked up my phone and called the divorce lawyer I had researched weeks before. It was time to take action. Over the next few days, I began to quietly prepare. I gathered documents, bank statements, anything that might be useful. I stayed out of Greg's way, avoiding unnecessary confrontation. But the tension was palpable. One evening, Greg confronted me. "You've been weirdly quiet lately. What's going on?" I looked at him dispassionately. "Just thinking about a lot of things." "Are you still upset about the party?" "Meredith, you really need to let it go." "I can't, Greg. It's not just the party. It's everything. This isn't working anymore." He frowned, confusion turning into anger. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I need respect, and you're clearly incapable of giving it. I'm done." Greg laughed, though it was hollow and uneasy. "You're bluffing." I faced him, resolute. "No, I'm not. I spoke to a lawyer." The color drained from his face. "A lawyer? Are you insane?" "No, just tired. Tired of not being heard, of not being respected. This isn't a game, Greg. It's my life, and I'm taking it back." Greg's expression turned dark. "You'll regret this, Meredith." But as I walked away, the only thing I felt was an overwhelming sense of clarity. There was no turning back. My next steps were firmly in place. Coming home one evening, I hoped for quiet. Instead, I walked into chaos. Music blared, voices echoed, the unmistakable signs of another party. My stomach clenched, anger rising. I pushed through the mess of shoes and coats littering the hallway. "Greg!" I called out. No response. I found him in the living room, surrounded by friends, drink in hand, the party in full swing. He looked up and saw me, a slow smirk spreading across his face. "Meredith, join us. Why don't you?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Greg, we need to talk." "Now." Ignoring my tone, he laughed. "Everyone, meet the boss of the house," he said, clearly amused at his own joke. People glanced at me, some sympathetic, others just curious. I felt a mix of embarrassment and fury. "Greg, now." He shrugged, setting his drink down and following me into the kitchen. As soon as the door closed behind us, I turned to him, eyes blazing. "What is this? We talked about this. No more parties." He leaned against the counter, unbothered. "You're being dramatic. It's just a few friends." "No, Greg. This is disrespectful and you keep doing it." I could feel my hands shaking. Greg's expression turned cold. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just one night. One night? I scoffed. This is the third time this month. I've had enough. You need to chill, Meredith, he replied, dismissive. Life can't be all rules and schedules. I can't live like this, Greg. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said, my voice firm. His face twisted in surprise, then anger. A lawyer? For what? This. Yes, Greg, this, I said, gesturing around. It's clear you don't care about my feelings. You promised to respect our home, and you broke that promise. He took a step closer, sneering. You're really going to throw away our marriage over a couple of parties? Yes, I am. Because it's not just the parties. It's the constant disrespect, the disregard for my feelings. I'm done. He looked at me, eyes narrowing. You think you can just walk away? Good luck, Meredith. You'll regret this. I didn't flinch. Maybe, but it can't be worse than this. Without another word, I walked past him, grabbed my phone, and went to the bedroom. My hands were shaking as I called the lawyer again, setting up a meeting to finalize the papers. I couldn't keep doing this. Later that night, after everyone left, Greg stumbled into the bedroom. So that's it? We're done? He slurred, clearly drunk. Yes, Greg. We're done, I said, not looking up from packing a small bag. I'm leaving tonight. He grabbed my arm, making me look at him. You won't survive without me. I pulled my arm free. Watch me. Leaving the house felt surreal, like stepping out of a nightmare. As I drove away, the weight on my chest started to lift. This was just the beginning, but it was my beginning. There was no going back. My next chapter started now. I woke up early, the sun barely breaking through the curtains. The divorce papers lay on the nightstand, staring at me like a challenge waiting to be met. Today was the day. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of resolve and anxiety. By the time Greg woke up and stumbled into the kitchen, I was ready. I placed the papers on the table, my heart pounding. Good morning, Greg groaned, not yet noticing the documents. Morning, I replied, my voice calm. We need to talk. He finally saw the papers and froze. What's this? Divorce papers, I said with finality. I'm serious, Greg. You need to sign them. His eyes widened with a mix of shock and anger. You're really doing this? Yes, I am, I said. You had every chance to change. I need respect and peace, and you can't give me that. He grabbed the papers and waved them at me. This is insane. You're throwing away everything over a few arguments? It's not just a few arguments, Greg. It's about trust, respect, all the things you seem to lack. He slapped the papers back on the table. You'll regret this, Meredith. You think you won, but you haven't. I held my ground, my voice steady. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about my peace and my future. He stared at me for a long moment before finally slumping into a chair. Fine. You want your precious respect? Here, he said, grabbing a pen and scrawling his signature angrily. Take it. A wave of relief washed over me, but I remained composed. Thank you. As he handed the papers back, his eyes darkened. Don't think for a second that this is over. You'll see. The threat hung in the air, but I didn't flinch. Goodbye, Greg, I said, turning away and heading out the door. The fresh air hitting my face felt liberating. The next few days flew by. I moved into a small, cozy apartment across town. It was a fresh start, a new beginning that I desperately needed. I dedicated myself to my work, pouring my energy into something constructive. My colleagues noticed the shift, offering support and encouragement. During a quiet evening, as I was organizing my thoughts, my phone rang. It was Dorothy, Greg's mother. Meredith, we need to talk, she said, her voice firm. Of course, Dorothy. What's going on? Come over to the house. We need to discuss this in person. I drove over, nervous but determined. Dorothy greeted me at the door, her expression serious. I heard about the divorce, she said as we sat down in the living room. Yes, it was a difficult decision, but necessary. She nodded, her gaze piercing. I need you to know something about Greg. His father. He had similar issues. I never intervened, thinking he would change, but he never did. I was stunned, but I listened intently. Greg has been irresponsible and manipulative, even with money. He's accrued debts in your name and drained the joint account. My stomach clenched. How could he do this? Dorothy sighed, eyes filled with regret. I thought he'd grow out of it. Apparently, I was wrong. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal. What do I do now? Dorothy reached out, taking my hand. I stand with you on this. We need to set things right. I'll help in any way I can. Her support was a lifeline. Together, we devised a plan to confront Greg and hold him accountable. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring such deceit wouldn't go unpunished. As I drove back to my apartment later that night, a sense of determination settled over me. Greg wasn't going to get away with this. The fight was far from over, but I wasn't alone anymore. I stood outside Greg's apartment, my heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and determination. Dorothy's words echoed in my mind, stealing my resolve. Today was the day I confronted Greg with the financial deceit he'd been hiding. I knocked firmly. A moment later, the door swung open. Greg, looking disheveled, stared at me in surprise. "Meredith? What the hell are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, pushing past him and into the apartment. Dorothy followed, her presence a silent support. Greg closed the door, clearly annoyed. "What's this about?" "I found out about the debts, Greg. The ones you racked up in my name," I said bluntly, eyes locked on his. His face went pale, but then he laughed, a nervous, mocking sound. "Oh, come on. You're overreacting. They're just a few charges." Dorothy stepped forward, her expression stern. "Don't lie, Greg. We have the evidence." Greg's eyes flickered with anger. "So what? You're here to gang up on me? Make me the bad guy?" "You are the bad guy," I said, keeping my voice level. "You betrayed my trust, and now you need to own up to it." He sneered, crossing his arms. "And if I don't, then we'll take legal action." "Fraud is a serious crime, Greg," Dorothy said, her tone unyielding. Greg's defiance wavered. He looked between us, his bravado starting to crack. "Fine. What do you want?" "Repay every cent you took from the joint account. Clear all debts in my name," I demanded. "And I want it in writing," he scoffed. "You think I have that kind of money just lying around?" Dorothy stepped closer, eyes blazing. "Then sell your assets, figure it out. You created this mess, you will fix it." Greg's face contorted with frustration and fear. "You're ruining my life, Meredith." "No, Greg," I said quietly. "You ruined mine. I'm just taking it back." He glared at me, then at Dorothy. "You both can't do this." Dorothy's voice was calm but firm. "We already have. I've spoken to a lawyer too. If you don't comply, they'll take it from here." Greg's shoulders slumped. He looked defeated, a shadow of the man who had once thought he had all the power. "Fine. I'll do it. Anything to get you off my back." "Good," I said, relief washing over me. "I'll have the paperwork ready by the end of the week. Sign it, and we'll be done." We turned to leave, but Greg called out, "Meredith, wait." I paused, not looking back. "What is it, Greg?" "I'm sorry," he said, his voice softer, though still tinged with bitterness. I turned around, meeting his eyes. "Too late for that, Greg. Actions have consequences. I hope you learn from this." Dorothy and I walked out, the weight of confrontation lifting slightly. As we reached my car, she turned to me, her expression softening. "You did well in there." "Thanks to you," I said, gratitude filling my voice. "I couldn't have done it alone." She nodded. "Now focus on your future. Don't let him drag you down again." Driving away, I felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. The battle was far from over, but I had allies. Greg's manipulations had come to light, and I was taking control of my life. A sense of empowerment surged within me. This was just the beginning of my journey towards reclaiming my happiness. Moving out of Greg's shadow felt like stepping into the sunlight after years in the dark. I settled into my new apartment, finding comfort in the quiet simplicity of my own space. There were no more unexpected parties, no more shouting matches, just peace. One evening, as I was settling into my new home routine, my phone rang. It was my lawyer, Sarah. "Meredith, I have some good news," she said, her voice calm but decisive. "We've settled the financial issues with Greg. He's agreed to repay everything." A wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you, Sarah. This means so much." "Of course," she replied. "We'll make sure he complies with the agreement. Don't worry about a thing." Hanging up, a deep sense of completion settled over me. But I knew that Greg wouldn't make it easy. A few weeks later, I received a call from an unknown number. Picking up, I was greeted by Greg's voice, strained and desperate. "Meredith, please, can we talk?" he pleaded. "What is it, Greg?" I kept my tone flat, emotions in check. "I'm struggling. I don't know how to deal with all this, selling the house, repaying debts. It's too much," he said, voice cracking slightly. "That's the consequence of your actions, Greg. You brought this upon yourself," I replied, feeling a pang of pity but quickly pushing it aside. "Can we at least meet up, just to talk things over?" he asked, desperation clear in his tone. "No, Greg, we're done. The papers are signed, and the agreement is in place. I have nothing more to say to you, I said firmly. You can't be this cold, Meredith. I need help, he tried again. I helped you for too long, Greg. Now you have to help yourself, I said, hanging up before he could respond. I knew his plea was another attempt to manipulate me, to drag me back into his web of chaos, but I was beyond that now. My focus was on healing, rebuilding, and moving forward. Dorothy visited me a few days later, bringing over a housewarming gift. How's the new place? She asked, looking around. It's perfect. Peaceful, I said, smiling genuinely. I'm glad to hear that, she said, sighing. Greg called me too. He's struggling. I know, I replied. He called me asking for help. She shook her head. He needs to learn responsibility. This is the only way. I agree, I said. Thank you for your support, Dorothy. I couldn't have done this without you. She smiled, taking my hand. You're strong, Meredith. Don't ever doubt that. As days turned into weeks, Greg's situation worsened. Forced to sell assets to pay back the debts, his life of reckless abandon came crashing down. I watched from a distance, detached, as he scrambled to pick up the pieces. In contrast, my life took a turn for the better. Work became my sanctuary, a place where I could channel my energy into something productive. My colleagues noticed the change, often complimenting my renewed focus and determination. One day, Sarah called again with the final update. Greg has completed the payments. Everything's settled now. Thank you, Sarah, I said, feeling truly free for the first time in years. After the call, I took a moment to reflect. Greg was a chapter of my life that had closed. Now it was time to write new ones, filled with peace, respect, and self-love. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over my new apartment, I felt a profound sense of liberation. The darkness of the past was behind me, and the future was bright with possibilities. Greg might still reach out, but his calls would go unanswered. I had reclaimed my life, and it was mine to cherish. Chadley, you're going to be a great dad. Thank you for being here. I froze. The voice coming from the DVD player felt like a knife to my heart. I stood in Chadley's office, clutching a dust rag, staring at the screen where a woman, bedridden and sweating, gripped the hand of my husband. Oh my God. Is that my husband's voice? I murmured, unable to tear my eyes away. Liz, Helen's voice broke my trance. She stepped into the room, her face a mask of concern. I think you should put this DVD back for now. We'll figure this out. I ejected the DVD, my hands trembling as I placed it back in its case, careful not to look at the printed label that stared back at me. Rachel's baby. Helen closed the office door behind us as we left. When we were in the kitchen, Helen poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across the table from me. Liz, I know this is shocking, but let's stay calm. We need to understand what's going on. I grasped my cup, trying to draw warmth from it, but it only made the growing chill inside me more apparent. But if it's true, what does it mean for us? Helen sighed, staring into her coffee. We need to find out more before jumping to conclusions. I'll support you, no matter what we discover. She reached out and squeezed my hand, her touch grounding me for a moment. That night, sleep came reluctantly. My mind was a carousel of images. Chadley in the delivery room, his soothing whispers to this woman, Rachel. Part of me wanted to confront him right away, but Helen's words echoed in my mind. We needed answers, and hasty actions wouldn't bring them. In the morning, Helen suggested we hire a private investigator. Liz, you're running your business and dealing with enough stress. Let professionals handle this. You're right. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight on my shoulders, but trying to stay strong. I'll call someone today. By noon, I had an appointment set with Jake Fulton, a private investigator. I want to know everything about Rachel and Chadley's involvement, I told him as we sat in his small office. Jake nodded, his expression one of practiced empathy. We'll get the answers you need. I'll start right away. Over the next few days, Helen and I kept our conversations to necessary topics. Chadley noticed my distant demeanor, but attributed it to my workload. He had no idea about the storm brewing. Jake reported back quickly. Rachel Miller, he began, unfolding what seemed like a saga about my husband's other life. Chadley's frequent business trips, many were visits to her. She lives just 2 towns over. As the pieces clicked into place, my anger bubbled but stayed controlled. Any sign of another man? I asked, remembering the name Dan from the dossier Jake handed us. Jake nodded. Dan Parker. He believed he was the father of Rachel's child. Helen and I decided we needed to talk to Dan. Maybe he had answers or pieces of the puzzle we still missed. Meeting him at a local diner, the air was thick with tension. Dan, we need to talk about Rachel, I began, feeling a strange camaraderie with this man I had never met. His eyes widened with mixed emotions. What's this about? He demanded. Through shared pain, we pieced together a story of deception. Dan had been as fooled as I was. Together, we planned to confront Rachel and Chadley, two deceivers caught in their web of lies. Helen's eyes gleamed with determination the next morning. We need to set the stage for this revelation properly. I gave a weary smile. Chadley's birthday is coming up. Perfect timing, isn't it? She nodded. Everyone deserves to know the truth, Liz. But how? I asked, the enormity of the task weighing on me. We'll figure it out, Helen assured me, squeezing my hand once more. We have to. The plan was set in motion. Secrets ready to be unveiled, actions poised to shatter our facades. The kitchen table turned into our war room. Helen and I sifted through the evidence Jake had gathered. Photos, receipts, and notes on Chadley's movements painted a picture of betrayal. There's no denying it now, Helen said, her voice steady but eyes glistening with a mix of anger and sadness. We have to face reality. I nodded, clutching a receipt from a fancy hotel I had never visited. It's worse than I imagined. The tears I had been holding back began to fall. Helen reached over, her hand warm and comforting. Liz, don't panic. We need to understand what's going on. Jumping to conclusions won't help. But if it's true, what does it mean for us? I choked out, the enormity of the situation hitting me all at once. Helen took a deep breath. It means we need to be smart about our next steps. You'll take a break from your business. We'll hire a lawyer to protect your interests. My life felt like it was spiraling out of control. I had to keep my composure, not just for myself, but for the future. I still hoped I could rebuild from this mess. I trusted Helen's wisdom. She had been a rock and a second mother to me. When nighttime fell, the house felt foreign. Chadley came home, kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, and retreated to his study. I sat stiffly on the couch, trying to act normal. The sound of his laughter on old nights felt like a cruel joke now. The following day, I found myself in the polished office of Kim Hathaway, a seasoned family lawyer. Helen joined us for moral support. Liz, tell me what you know so far, Kim prompted, her eyes sharp and attentive. I handed her the folder of evidence we had compiled. I want to know what can be done. I think he has another family. Kim's face softened, but her professional demeanor remained intact. First, we'll file for a separation. I'll also get a restraining order if necessary. Let's take it step by step. Her words gave me a sense of direction. What about Rachel? Is there any legal action we can take against her too? Kim leaned back, contemplating. If she's defrauded you and Dan, there might be grounds, but we need irrefutable evidence first. We thanked her and left the office with a clearer plan. My resolve hardened with each step I took. I had lost enough sleep, enough joy. It was time to reclaim some control. Back home, Helen and I reviewed the newly gained information about Dan. The man seemed genuine, as hurt by Rachel's lies as I was. We decided to confront him directly, hoping to form a united front. Meeting Dan had been tense, but oddly cathartic. Joining forces felt like a step toward justice. The next big hurdle was Rachel. We tracked her down to a small cafe she frequented. Helen and I walked in, our presence immediately capturing Reel's attention. Her smile vanished, replaced by a mask of wariness. Rachel, I began, my voice surprisingly steady, we need to talk, now. She hesitated, then nodded, motioning us to a secluded corner. Her discomfort mirrored my own. What do you want? Rachel asked, eyes darting between us. Answers, I replied firmly. We know about Chadley and the child. Her eyes flashed with something. Guilt, fear, perhaps both. I don't know what you think you know, she started. No games, Helen interjected, her voice cold but controlled. We have evidence. Your lies end here. Rachel's shoulders slumped slightly, and I could see the fight leaving her. She realized the game was up. Fine, she said quietly. I'll tell you everything. Her admission felt like a victory, but also a bitter confirmation of our worst fears. The path ahead was clear now. We needed to expose Chadley, and it began with a confrontation that would shake our family to its core. My fingers tapped restlessly on the desk as Jake updated me on the latest findings. The private investigator's office felt suffocating, crammed with files and the scent of stale coffee. "Liz," Jake started, adjusting his glasses. "We've uncovered more about Rachel. She's been living off Chadley's money. They've also co-signed on an apartment lease." Helen gripped my shoulder, her fury barely concealed. "So he's been funding her life while we struggled? Unbelievable." I sank deeper into my chair, feeling a cocktail of betrayal and determination. "And Dan? What's his involvement?" Jake handed over a series of surveillance photos. "Rachel's been stringing him along, making him believe he's the father. He's been covering additional expenses, private school applications, medical bills." Helen's eyes narrowed. "Rachel's been playing everyone for fools." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "What about business trips? How often did he visit her?" "More than half," Jake replied, flipping through some documents. "She lives in a neighboring town, but they met up during business trips too. She has proof of their meetings, texts and emails." "Rachel's been smart," Helen muttered, "but not smart enough." There was a pause before Jake spoke again. "What's the next step for you, Liz?" I clenched my fists. "I want every detail exposed. Let's talk to the lawyer. That woman, Rachel, she must be held accountable too." Kim Hathaway's office was as pristine as ever. She listened intently as we described Rachel's manipulations. "Liz," Kim began, "your situation warrants comprehensive action. We'll start with legal separation from Chadley. Gathering more concrete proof of the fraud will be vital." "What about Rachel?" I asked. "We could potentially charge her with fraud," Kim said, her eyes sharp. "But we need irrefutable evidence." I nodded. "We have to move fast. Chadley's birthday is approaching. It's the perfect chance to confront them both." Back at home, Helen and I busied ourselves with preparations. I had to act normal around Chadley, which made my skin crawl. Each time he smiled or tried to be affectionate felt like a betrayal all over again. The day before Chadley's birthday party, Helen and I met up with Dan. We filled him in on our plan, and he seemed ready for a showdown. "You have to confront them at the party, Dan," I said, feeling more like a general than a woman whose life was falling apart. "Everyone will be there, family, friends. They need to see the truth." Dan looked grim but determined. "I'll be there." The day of the party arrived. Helen and I moved through the motions of hosting as if everything was perfect. Guests filled the living room, laughing and chatting, unaware of the storm brewing. Chadley entered, surprised by the gathering, friends clapping, Helen hugging him. "Happy birthday," echoed through the house. I forced a smile, knowing the moment was near. As the cake was being cut, I nodded to Dan, who had positioned himself near the entertainment center. He gave us the signal and quietly inserted the damning DVD. The room darkened as the screen sprang to life. "Liz, what the hell are you doing?" Chadley's voice was sharp, cutting through the room's cheerful atmosphere. "Silence. Chadley, watch," Helen demanded, her voice steady even as my heart pounded in my chest. Gasps filled the room as the video played. Chadley's comforting coos to Rachel as she pushed through labor, his gentle touch that had once been reserved for me, now public for everyone to see. The shockwaves of revelation rippled through the assembly. Family members whispered, friends looked horrified. I stepped forward, feeling strength surge through my veins. "This is who Chadley really is," I declared, "living a double life, with Rachel, who stole your trust and love, Dan." Dan stepped up, his voice resolute. "We have proof of their betrayal. DNA tests show Chadley isn't the father. Rachel lied." The room descended into chaos, but in the middle of it, I felt an unexpected calm. The lies were exposed, and the path to justice had begun. The room was a cauldron of confusion and disbelief. Chadley's face turned ashen, beads of sweat forming on his brow as he locked eyes with me. "Liz, you had no right." "Save it," I snapped, my voice slicing through his excuses. "You lied to all of us." Helen stood beside me, her presence a fortress of support. "This has to stop, Chadley. You've hurt too many people." Dan stepped forward, his eyes burning with betrayal. "Rachel, we need to talk. About everything." Rachel's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. "Dan, I can explain." "Explain?" Dan's voice was sharp. "You used me. Lied to me." Chadley tried to regain control of the situation. "Everyone, please, let's not make a scene." "Too late for that," Helen interjected. "You made your choices." Rachel finally found her voice, though it trembled. "I never intended for anyone to get hurt." Stop lying, I shouted, feeling my emotions surge. All you did was lie. Rachel turned to Dan, tears streaming down her face. Dan, please, I need you to believe me. He shook his head, disgust shaping his features. You're poison, Rachel, to everyone you touch. Relatives and friends began to whisper, their faces masked in a mix of shock and disgust. No one seemed to side with Chadley or Rachel. It was clear their deceit had dug their own graves. Trying to salvage a shred of dignity, Chadley approached me. Liz, can we talk privately? I took a step back, crossing my arms. There's nothing to talk about, not anymore. Helen raised a hand, signaling for silence. Everyone deserves to know what kind of people Chadley and Rachel are. There should be no secrets left to fester. Seeing he had no allies, Chadley's desperation grew. Liz, please, I'm begging you. Begging is for the guilty, I stated coldly, and you're as guilty as they come. Dan wasn't any more forgiving. Rachel, I'm suing you. Fraud, emotional distress, the works. Rachel collapsed into a chair, finally defeated. I never meant for it to go this far. Helen's eyes were filled with steely determination. Maybe you should have thought of that before betraying everyone you claimed to care about. The room fell into a strained silence, the enormity of the situation starting to settle. Chadley and Rachel looked around, finding only judgment and disdain. Helen and I nodded to each other, an unspoken understanding passing between us. I'm filing for divorce, I announced, the finality of the words echoing in the stillness. You're no longer part of my life. Chadley's shoulders slumped. He realized that not only had he lost me, but also the respect of everyone gathered. Enough, I said, turning away from him. This is over. With a final glance, Helen and I began to escort our guests out, thanking them for coming and apologizing for the scene. The weight of relief mixed with sorrow felt surreal. As the door closed behind the last guest, Helen looked at me. We did it, Liz. It's done. I nodded, feeling a tear slide down my cheek. Thank you for standing by me, Helen. I wouldn't have survived this without you. Helen hugged me tightly. We're family, and we're stronger than ever. Inside, I knew there were more battles ahead. Legalities, emotional wounds, and rebuilding my life without Chadley. But for now, the first and most important step had been taken, facing the truth head-on and refusing to live a lie. Dan approached us before leaving. We're in this together now, he said, holding out his hand. I shook it. Thank you, Dan, for everything. He nodded, grim but resolute. We'll get through this, all of us. As I closed the door, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and newfound strength. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, I was content, knowing the truth had finally seen the light. The shadows were lifting, and with them, the promise of a better future. The days leading up to the confrontation were a blur of preparations. Helen and I decided Chadley's upcoming surprise birthday party would be the perfect moment to unveil the truth. We needed to ensure that everyone who mattered was there. So, how do we do this? I asked Helen one afternoon as we sorted through the guest list. Simple, she said, tapping the list with a pen. We gather everyone together and play the DVD. The shock will do the rest. The plan was set. Chadley's birthday morning was oddly tranquil. I prepared a light breakfast, trying to act like everything was normal. Chadley, blissfully unaware, joked about his age and what a wonderful wife I was. My smile was tight, but he didn't notice. Don't forget, we've got that dinner tonight, I said, hiding the tremor in my voice. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Chadley said with a wink. His affection felt like acid on my skin. The evening arrived, and the house filled with guests. Relatives and close friends chatted, unaware of the drama about to unfold. I spotted Dan lingering near the doorway, and we exchanged nods of encouragement. As we gathered in the living room, I caught Helen's eye. She nodded subtly. Time to set the stage. Thank you all for coming, Helen announced, smiling warmly. We have a special surprise for Chadley. He beamed, looking around at everyone. You guys shouldn't have. You deserve it, I said, my words double-edged. Helen moved to the TV, inserting the dreaded DVD. As the screen lit up, Chadley looked confused. His confusion turned to horror as Rachel's face appeared, contorted in labor. The room fell silent, all eyes glued to the damning footage. What is this? Chadley's voice shook, a mix of anger and panic creeping into his tone. Keep watching, Helen commanded, her voice icy. The video continued, showing Chadley's intimate moments with Rachel. Gasps filled the room. whispers of disbelief spreading like wildfire. "Liz, turn this off. This is a mistake," Chadley pleaded, but I shook my head. "No mistakes here, Chadley. Just the truth." Rachel, who had timidly stood at the back, now stepped forward, head bowed. "I'm sorry, everyone." Dan pushed to the front, fury etched on his face. "You think sorry fixes this? You destroyed lives, Rachel." Chadley's face twisted with desperation. "Liz, please, we can talk about this." Helen stepped in front of me, shielding me from his reach. "You've done enough talking, Chadley. It's time everyone knew who you really are." The guests were no longer whispering. Outright exclamations of anger and betrayal echoed through the room. Chadley looked around, realizing no one was on his side. "No more lies," I said firmly. "This marriage is over. I want a divorce." Chadley's shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked at Rachel, who was crying. "Rachel, how could you?" Rachel looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "I never meant to hurt anyone, Chadley," Dan scoffed. "Too late for that. You hurt all of us." Helen, ever the matriarch, faced the crowd. "Now you all know the truth. These two have betrayed us. The only thing left is justice." The room was filled with a mix of redemption and sorrow. It was the end of an era for our family, but also a new beginning. Chadley and Rachel stood there, exposed and broken. I watched as the last few guests left, unable to shake the sense of finality hovering in the air. Helen turned to me, her eyes filled with both sadness and relief. "We did what needed to be done," she said softly. I nodded, feeling the weight of our actions, but also an unexpected lightness. The truth was out. Now we could begin to heal. "We'll get through this, Liz," Dan said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "All of us." Helen gave me a tight hug. "We're here for each other now. Always." As I closed the door on that harrowing evening, I felt a strange sense of peace. The storm had passed, and the path ahead, though difficult, was clear. The aftermath of the confrontation hung heavy in the air. Chadley and Rachel were in shambles, their charades demolished. The room had emptied, but the echo of their deceit lingered. "Liz, let's talk," Chadley pleaded, his face an agonized mask. "Please, give me a chance to explain." "There's nothing left to explain," I said coldly, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's over. I'm filing for divorce." He grabbed my arm, desperation tinging his touch. "You can't just end us like this. We've been through so much." Helen stepped forward, prying his hand off me with a firm grip. "Don't you dare touch her, Chadley. You're not welcome here anymore." Chadley's eyes narrowed, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You always took her side, even when she was wrong." Helen didn't flinch. "I stood by what was right. Clearly, that wasn't you." Rachel stood to the side, sniffling and wiping tears. She eyed Dan, hoping for some sympathy. "Dan, I'm so sorry. Please, we can work this out." Dan's face was etched with betrayal and fury. "Rachel, there's nothing left to work out. You lied to me, to everyone. I'm suing you for fraud. You should get a lawyer." Rachel collapsed into a chair, her sobs growing louder. "I never meant for it to go this far." I watched the scene unfold, feeling an odd mix of vindication and sorrow. The damage was done, and all that was left was to move forward. Chadley turned to me with pleading eyes. "Liz, please, let's not do this. Think about us, our memories, everything we've built." "Everything we built was a lie," I said, my voice thick. "There's no going back." He sank to his knees, head in his hands. "I'll never forgive myself for this." Helen's gaze was steely. "Good. You shouldn't." Dan, weary but resolute, shook his head. "Chadley, Rachel, whatever you hope to salvage, it's gone. You did this to yourselves." It was a strange sight, seeing Chadley, once so composed, now crumbling before me. The room felt too small, filled with the weight of our shattered lives. Helen took my hand, guiding me away from the wreckage. "We have preparations to make," she said softly. "This is just the beginning." The next few days were a whirlwind of legal meetings and paperwork. Kim Hathaway guided us meticulously through the process, ensuring I was protected. Dan was relentless in his pursuit of justice against Rachel. "We need to finalize the DNA tests," Kim instructed. "Dan, if this goes to court, we need irrefutable proof." Dan nodded, a hardened look settling on his face. "We will." Throughout the ordeal, Helen remained my rock. "You're doing the right thing, Liz. We'll come out stronger." One evening, we sat in the living room, the silence thick between us. I finally voiced the question that had been haunting me. "Helen, do you think I'll ever feel normal again?" She wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Normal might look different, but yes, you will find peace again." Finally, the day came for Chadley to move out. His presence felt ghostly as he packed, casting hollow glances around our home. He tried to speak, but I cut him off. "Save your breath, Chadley. There's nothing you can say that will change this." As he walked out the door, bags in hand, a heavy silence filled the space he left behind. Helen and I sat together, the vast emptiness of the house wrapping around us. "We survived this," Helen said quietly, "and we're stronger for it." "Yeah," I agreed, staring out the window at the departing figure of my former husband. "We are." The road to healing would be long, but I knew I wasn't alone. With Helen and Dan by my side, we faced the future, with a resilience forged in the fires of betrayal, and together we would rebuild, brick by brick, into something unbreakable. The court was oppressive, with its cold walls and judgmental air. Rachel sat at one of the tables, looking fragile and defeated. Her once confident demeanor had vanished, replaced by a haunting vulnerability. I watched her, feeling a peculiar mix of pity and wrath. Kim stood beside me, her confidence a balm to my frayed nerves. "This won't be easy, Liz," she said quietly, "but it's necessary." Dan sat across from us, his posture straight, his face a mask of determination. We exchanged a nod, an unspoken pact of solidarity. Today was the day we held Rachel and Chadley accountable. The judge entered, and the court came to order. Rachel's lawyer rose, attempting a defense soaked in rationalizations. "Your Honor," he began, "my client deeply regrets her actions. She never intended for things to spiral out of control. Her intent was not deceit, but desperation." Dan's lawyer, a stern woman named Grace, stood elegantly. "Intent does not negate impact, Your Honor. Rachel Miller knowingly deceived multiple parties, causing emotional and financial damage." Rachel's lawyer continued to plead her case. Rachel was under immense stress. She believed she was providing for her child. Grace interjected, "By defrauding two men and emotionally scarring numerous people, that's hardly justifiable." The judge nodded thoughtfully before turning to Rachel. "Miss Miller, do you have anything to say?" Rachel stood shakily, eyes darting between us. I'm truly sorry. I know I hurt people, but I was scared. I didn't know what else to do." Dan's voice cut through the court with icy precision. "You didn't know what to do. How about telling the truth?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Dan, you have to believe me. I was lost." "Lost?" Dan's anger was palpable. "You were selfish. You used us." Helen squeezed my hand under the table, her presence steadying me. Kim remained focused, her eyes locked on Rachel. Chadley's turn came, as he had to testify regarding his involvement. He walked up to the stand, his once confident demeanor now shattered. "Mr. Monroe, were you aware of Miss Miller's deceit?" Grace asked. Chadley swallowed hard, looking down. "Not fully, no. I was led to believe I was the father of her child." Grace's gaze was unrelenting. "So you claim ignorance?" He nodded slightly. Yes." Dan's face contorted with fury. "You're a liar, Chadley." The judge raised a hand. "Order in the court." Kim took her turn. "Mr. Monroe, you claim you were ignorant, yet you continued to maintain a relationship with Miss Miller. How do you explain that?" Chadley shifted uncomfortably. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "And your wife?" Kim pressed on. "Did she deserve the lies?" He had no answer, his silence speaking louder than any words could. The judge looked at Chadley with disdain. "Mr. Monroe, your actions were not justifiable." As testimonies wrapped up, the judge took a moment before delivering the verdict. "In light of the evidence and the profound deceit involved, I find Rachel Miller guilty of fraud and emotional distress. Custody of the child will be reevaluated. Chadley Monroe's involvement, while not fully complicit, played a crucial role in the damages caused." The courtroom's tension broke slightly with murmurs of approval. Dan looked relieved, though still burdened by the ordeal. Helen gave my hand a final squeeze. "Justice," she whispered. Outside the courtroom, Dan approached me. "We did it, Liz. We stood up for ourselves." I nodded, finally feeling a semblance of closure. "Yes, we did." Chadley walked past us, eyes downcast. He stopped briefly as if to say something, but then continued walking away without a word. Rachel was taken into custody, leaving behind a mess of shattered lives. Despite the relief of justice, a lingering sadness remained. The damage was done, the wounds deep. Helen, Dan, and I walked out together, finding solace in unity. "We'll heal," Helen said, her voice a promise. Dan added, "We have each other now. We'll get through this." As we stepped into the fresh air, I felt a weight lift. The path to recovery was long, but I was no longer walking it alone. The shadows of betrayal had been cast off, replaced by a newfound strength and the support of those who mattered most. The weeks following the court verdict felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel. Helen, Dan, and I started to piece our lives back together, slowly but surely. One afternoon, Helen and I sat in the living room, sorting through old photo albums. The pictures felt like relics from a different era. "Look at this," she said, holding up a picture of Chadley and me on our wedding day. "You looked so happy." I sighed, taking the photo from her. "It feels like a lifetime ago, but I'm grateful for where we are now." "Same here," Helen replied, her eyes softening. "We have each other, and that's what matters." Just then, my phone rang. It was Kim Hathaway. "Liz, I wanted to update you on the custody hearing for Rachel's child." My heart raced. "What's the news?" "Dan has been granted temporary custody," Kim said. "We need to ensure the child's well-being during this period." "That's great news," I said, relief washing over me. "Dan will be thrilled." After hanging up, I called Dan immediately. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, Liz, what's up?" "I'm calling with good news. You've been granted temporary custody." Dan exhaled deeply, the weight of the past months visible in his voice. "Thank you, Liz. This means a lot." Later that day, Dan came by with his son, little Jake. The boy clutched a toy car, eyes wide with curiosity. "Hey, Jake, this is Aunt Liz," Dan introduced. "Hi, Jake," I said, kneeling to his level. "Want to see a cool toy room?" Jake nodded enthusiastically and disappeared upstairs with Helen, leaving Dan and me alone in the kitchen. "Liz, I can't thank you enough for everything," Dan began, his voice filled with gratitude. "We're in this together," I replied. "How are you holding up?" "Better, knowing Jake's with me," he said, running a hand through his hair. "But there's still a lot to figure out." Helen returned, smiling. "Jake's enjoying the toys. He's got a lot of questions, though," Dan chuckled. "That's Jake for you." As the evening progressed, we shared stories and laughter, a stark contrast to the turmoil we'd faced. It felt like the start of something new, something hopeful. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Chadley. My hands shook slightly as I opened it, bracing myself for whatever it contained. "Liz, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need you to understand how sorry I am. I've lost everything because of my own actions. My wife, my integrity, and the respect of everyone I care about. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope you find peace in knowing that I deeply regret all I've done." Chadley, I read the letter twice, processing his words. Helen found me in the kitchen, the letter clenched in my hand. "What's that?" she asked gently. "A letter from Chadley," I said, passing it to her. Helen read it and looked up, her eyes thoughtful. "He's trying to make amends in his own way." "Too little, too late," I replied. "But at least he acknowledges his mistakes." "That's something," Helen agreed. "But we have more important things to focus on now." We spent the evening planning activities for Jake, making sure Dan felt supported in his new role as a single father. The sense of family grew stronger, weaving its threads tighter around us. In the weeks that followed, we established new routines and created new memories. Dan and Jake became regular fixtures at our home, filling the space with laughter and warmth. One night, as we gathered for dinner, Dan raised his glass. "To new beginnings, and to the family we've found in each other." "To us," Helen and I echoed, clinking our glasses together. As I looked around the table, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had survived our darkest days and emerged stronger, bonded by resilience and the promise of a brighter future. The scars would fade, but the strength we found in each other would remain forever. "She's nothing but a glorified maid with no education," Justin said, his voice dripping with disdain. My blood boiled instantly. I glanced around the dinner table, shocked by the cold words that shattered the air. Justin's parents, Evelyn and Richard, exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't try to hide their discomfort. "Justin, that's enough," Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly. "Well, it's the truth, Mom," he replied, shrugging as if it was the most natural statement in the world. "Eva, you know I'm just being honest." I looked at him, my mind racing. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. His charming smile and tender gestures now seemed like a cruel facade. "Is this really what you think of me?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed. Come on, Eva, let's not make a scene. I'm sure they want to know who they're dealing with. I couldn't believe his audacity. After everything. I stopped myself, afraid my voice would crack. My heart pounded as I tried to maintain composure. I glanced at Evelyn and Richard, looking for any sign of support. Evelyn's eyes held regret, while Richard stared at his plate, seemingly lost for words. Justin's smirk was the final straw. I pushed back my chair and stood up, my hands trembling. "Excuse me," I muttered, heading towards the front door. I needed fresh air. Needed to think. "Eva, wait," Evelyn called after me. I paused, feeling her gentle hand on my shoulder. I don't know what Justin was thinking. Please, don't judge us by his words. He can be difficult. I looked at her, her eyes sincere. "He's never talked to me like that before," I said. I don't know what to think." "Give it time, dear," she said softly. "These things have a way of sorting themselves out." I nodded weakly and stepped outside, the cool evening air hitting my face. I never imagined that the man I moved in with would turn out to be so condescending. His words echoed in my mind, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. Justin soon joined me on the porch, pretending everything was fine. "You didn't have to leave," he said casually, as if dismissing the whole affair. "I can't believe you said that," I replied, my voice quivering with suppressed anger. "Do you really think so little of me?" "Eva, you need to understand something," he said, his tone shifting to one of mild irritation. "My parents needed to know about your background. There's nothing wrong with being honest." "I need some time alone," I said, cutting him off. I couldn't stand to hear any more. He raised his hands defensively. "Fine, but don't be dramatic." I watched him walk back inside, the door closing softly behind him. I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me. This wasn't the first time I had felt his condescending attitude, but it had never been so blatant. I thought about my mother, Sharon, waiting at home for me. Her frail condition and need for constant care already wore heavily on my spirit. Justin's words cut deeper than he knew, hitting the raw nerves of my insecurities and fears. I thought I had found a partner, someone to build a life with, but tonight's events tore down that illusion. As I stood on the porch, the night air cooling my heated skin, I resolved not to let this define me. No matter how charming or successful Justin was, I had my dignity. I glanced back at the house one last time. This would not be the end, but a beginning. One way or another, I would find a way through this. "I'm out there saving lives while you flounder in mediocrity," Justin snarled as he tossed his keys on the kitchen counter. The sound of metal clanging echoed through the apartment, emphasizing his words. I froze, the dishcloth in my hand halfway to the sink. "Excuse me?" "You heard me, Eva," he said, rolling his eyes. "Do you know how tiring it is to come home to this mess after a 12-hour shift?" I glanced around the spotless kitchen. Nothing was out of place. "What mess?" I asked, exasperated. He stalked toward me, pointing a finger in my face. "Your life is a mess. Look at you, a high school dropout, waiting tables and cleaning houses. Do you think that's impressive?" My heart pounded as his words sank in. The man I fell in love with was nowhere to be seen. "I contribute to this household, too," I managed to say, my voice trembling with anger. Justin scoffed. "Barely. I cover most of the bills. What you make is peanuts." I clenched my fists, feeling the anger build up inside me, but I decided to stay calm. "I'm doing the best I can, Justin, and I'm also caring for my mom. That's not nothing." He shook his head, laughing bitterly. "Always your mother. You're drowning in mediocrity, and you drag me down with you." I turned away, blinking back tears. His words were like knives cutting deep. I could hear him behind me, the sound of his heavy breathing filling the room. "You know what?" I said, refusing to let him see me break down. "Maybe you'd be happier if I wasn't here." "Maybe I would," he spat out. "Or maybe you could actually try to better yourself." I planted my feet firmly on the ground, turning back to face him. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth I once adored. "I thought we were partners," I said quietly. "But you see me as a burden." "Eva, open your eyes," he snapped. "Partners? Mutual respect? That's fantasy. Welcome to reality." The sting of his words left a bitter taste in my mouth. "I need some air," I said, brushing past him to the front door. I could feel his eyes burning into my back but didn't turn around. Out on the street, the cool night air felt like freedom. I tried to piece together how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The charming, supportive man I met through the dating app was now nothing more than a controlling tyrant. As I walked, my mind drifted to the early days of our relationship, the sweet text messages, the late-night talks, and the promises that now felt hollow. I needed to talk to Sharon. The next afternoon, during one of my rare breaks, I visited her at the old family home. She lay on the couch, looking frail but cheerful. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to mask my stress with a smile. "Hey, sweetheart," she replied, patting the space beside her. I sat down, and she immediately noticed something was off. "Tell me what's wrong," she said. I sighed, leaning my head back against the couch. "It's Justin, Mom. He's changed, or maybe I'm just now seeing the real him." She frowned, her eyes filled with concern. "What happened?" "The way he talks to me," I began, pausing to find the right words without breaking down. "He treats me like I'm less than him, like I'm nothing." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "You're not nothing, Eva. You are strong, stronger than you know." Her words brought tears to my eyes, but I blinked them away. "Thanks, Mom. I needed that." We sat there in shared silence, her hand in mine. In that moment, I realized that whatever the future held, I had to be strong, for myself and for her. I would not let Justin's cruelty destroy my spirit. "Stop being so useless and get this house in order," Justin barked as he slammed the door behind him. The force of it sent a shiver through the apartment, like an earthquake had struck. Exhaustion turned into raw, seething anger inside me. I gripped the broom tighter, forcing myself not to snap. "I've been cleaning all day, and I still have to go take care of Mom," I said, keeping my voice calm as possible. He rolled his eyes. "Always an excuse with you, Eva. You think this is hard? Try doing what I do for even a day." "I'm doing my best," I replied, my voice shaking. "Maybe if you could help once in a while." "Help?" Justin cut me off, laughing bitterly. "I'm a surgeon. My time is worth 10 times what yours is. You should be grateful I even talked to you." My fists clenched so tightly around the broom that my knuckles turned white. I turned my back to him, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Taking a deep breath, I began sweeping furiously, each stroke a silent rebellion. "You know, my colleagues laugh at me," he sneered. "They can't believe I'm stuck with someone like you." His words stung like 1,000 paper cuts. "Then why don't you just leave?" I muttered under my breath, but loud enough for him to hear. He stormed over, yanking the broom from my hands and tossing it aside. "Because, Eva, you need me. You need my money, my status. Without me, you're nothing." I looked up at him, my defiance bubbling to the surface. "I don't need you, Justin. I won't be treated like garbage just because you have a fancy title." He stepped closer, invading my space, his eyes narrowing. "Without me, you'd be on the streets. Remember that next time you think about mouthing off." The ringing of my phone interrupted the tension. I grabbed it from the counter and saw my mother's number. Relief washed over me, an escape from this prison, albeit temporary. "I have to go," I said, brushing past Justin. "My mom needs me." "Just get out," he hissed, waving me off. "Barely worth my time." I walked out the door, his words echoing behind me like a dark cloud. The drive to my mother's was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. How had things turned so sour so quickly? When I arrived at my mother's house, Sharon was struggling to reach something from the top shelf in the kitchen. "Hey, Mom," I said, rushing to help her. "You should have called me." "Thanks, sweetheart," she said, her smile warm but tinged with fatigue. I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just busy. How are you feeling today?" She sat down at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of tea. "I'm okay, but you seem upset. What happened?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the words choked in my throat. "It's just Justin," I managed to say. "He's being impossible again." Her eyes filled with worry. "Eva, you don't have to put up with that. You deserve better." "I know, Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But it's complicated. I need to figure out how to handle this." Later that night, I found myself back at the apartment, dreading the confrontation that awaited me. Justin was in bed, his back turned to me, clearly uninterested in any kind of reconciliation. I lay down beside him, staring at the ceiling. My mind was made up. I couldn't continue like this. I needed to find out who he really was. If there were secrets, I would uncover them, and then I would make him pay for every degrading word, every humiliating moment. My resolve hardened, fueling a sense of determination I didn't know I had. I would gather the evidence, plan my move, and expose the man who thought he could treat people like disposable objects. Justin was about to learn that even someone floundering in mediocrity could fight back and win. This isn't just him being mean. This is criminal, I whispered to myself, staring at Justin's laptop screen. The encrypted emails I had decrypted slowly revealed a web of illegal activities that made my skin crawl. I quickly photographed the damning emails with my phone, my hands shaking. I had found everything from organ trafficking deals to bribery transactions. The charming surgeon was nothing more than a dangerous criminal. The front door opened and my heart skipped a beat. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it back into its hiding place just as Justin walked into the room. "Eva," he called out, his voice unusually cheerful. "What's for dinner?" "I ordered takeout," I said, forcing a smile, trying to hide the adrenaline coursing through me. He looked at me suspiciously. "Why are you acting so weird?" "Weird," I echoed, my voice steady. "I'm just tired, Justin. It's been a long day." He eyed me for a moment before shrugging. "Whatever. Make sure you set the table." As I set the table, my mind raced. What would my next move be? But for now, I had to play it cool. I couldn't let him suspect a thing. Later that week, as Justin continued his usual night shifts, I became more meticulous in gathering evidence. I copied files, took photos of documents, and even recorded some of our conversations. The more I uncovered, the more revolted I felt. During one of our dinners, Justin dropped another bomb. "I've invited my parents over this weekend," he said casually between bites. "We'll have a little family gathering. You can show my mother how useful you can be by preparing everything." I bit back the resentful reply that bubbled up. "Sure, Justin, I'll take care of it." As the weekend approached, I prepared meticulously, but not just for the gathering. It was time to turn the tables. When his parents arrived, I greeted them warmly, my heart pounding with anticipation. Evelyn smiled and embraced me, but Richard's stern face showed he wasn't convinced by the domestic facade. The dinner conversation started light, filled with polite chit-chat. I served the meal, trying to time everything perfectly. My pulse quickened as the conversation shifted. "Justin, how's work been lately?" Richard asked, his tone neutral. "Busy as always, Dad," Justin replied, beaming with pride. "Saving lives every day." I almost choked on my drink. The hypocrisy was unbearable, but I held my tongue. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. As the evening wore on, Justin's arrogance grew. Finally, he made a comment that made my blood boil. "You know," he said, glancing at me, "it's hard to balance such an important career with someone who barely contributes." That was it. I couldn't take any more. "Actually, Justin," I said, my voice steady, "I think it's time your parents knew the whole truth." Evelyn looked alarmed, and Richard's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about, Eva?" Justin asked, his voice low and threatening. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. "I found these on your laptop. Care to explain?" His face paled as the images of the incriminating emails flashed on the screen. Evelyn gasped, covering her mouth, while Richard's face turned red with fury. "What is this, Justin?" Evelyn asked, her voice trembling. Justin stammered, trying to come up with a lie, but the evidence was overwhelming. "It's not what it looks like," he pleaded. But the room had already turned against him. Richard stood up, his face stern. "Is this true, Justin? Have you been involved in illegal activities?" Justin's silence spoke volumes. Evelyn burst into tears, and Richard's eyes filled with disappointed anger. How could you? The confrontation had begun, and there was no turning back. I felt a surge of vindication, knowing that the truth was finally out in the open. Justin's world was about to crumble, and I was ready for the fallout. "You think your title gives you power over me? Over anyone?" I stated, my calm voice slicing through the tension-filled room like a knife. Justin's parents were still digesting the images on my phone. Evelyn's tear-streaked face looked shattered, while Richard appeared as if he might burst from anger. But none of that mattered now. "Eva, you better watch your mouth," Justin snarled, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and rage. "Enough is enough. Time to turn the tables," I said, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "You've treated me like dirt for too long, and now everyone will see who you really are." Justin lunged towards me, but Richard stepped in. "You stay right where you are," he bellowed, his face inches from Justin's. "Have you lost your mind, son?" Dad, it's not what it looks like, Justin tried to explain, his voice lacking the confidence it usually held. He looked cornered like a trapped animal. Evelyn sobbed quietly, her body shaking. Justin, how could you? We raised you better than this. Justin's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. Eva, get out, now, he growled, trying to regain control. No, I replied firmly. I'm not leaving. You are the one who will face the consequences. Richard turned to me, his voice softer but firm. Eva, I'm sorry for what you've been through, but we need to get to the bottom of this. I nodded, taking a step back to let the conversation unfold. Justin's face looked strained, the facade of the charming doctor cracking at the edges. Justin, you must come clean, Richard insisted, his stern judicial tone leaving no room for debate. You don't understand, Dad, Justin said, floundering. I did it to help people. These organ trades saved lives. Evelyn gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Justin, that's illegal. You risked everything, everyone, for money? Justin's face flushed with a mix of anger and shame. It's not just about the money, Mom. It's complicated. Complicated? Evelyn cried out. This is criminal. The room grew silent for a moment, the weight of what had been said hanging in the air like a dark storm cloud. I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. Finally, Justin was facing the consequences for his actions. Richard shook his head, looking his son dead in the eye. You need to turn yourself in. It's the only way to atone for what you've done. Justin's face turned pale, and he took a step back. Dad, you can't be serious. I'm very serious, Richard said, his voice firm. If you don't, I will. Justin's eyes widened in desperation. He turned to me, his expression a mix of hatred and pleading. Eva, please, don't do this. I held my ground, meeting his gaze with unyielding resolve. This isn't about revenge anymore, Justin. This is about right and wrong. Evelyn stood and placed a hand on Justin's arm, tears streaming down her face. Justin, we love you, but you must take responsibility for your actions. Traitor, Justin's eyes screamed at me, but his lips remained pressed in a thin line. He turned towards his father, defeated. Fine, if that's what it takes. Richard pulled out his phone and dialed quickly, each number a final nail in the coffin of Justin's charade. I'm calling our attorney. We're going to sort this out legally. As Richard's voice echoed through the room, making arrangements, I felt a mixture of relief and dread. This was just the beginning, but at least the truth was out. I watched as Justin stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. The man who had once controlled me was now facing the collapse of everything he held dear. For once, I felt hope for justice, for my mother, and for myself. My future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would not be a victim any longer. Is this true, Justin? Have you been trading lives for money? Evelyn's voice trembled with disbelief as she clutched her son's arm. The dining room felt like a courtroom. Justin stood there, cornered and pale, his eyes cast downward. Mom, he stammered, searching for words that wouldn't come. The truth finally out in the open, I thought, feeling a surge of vindication. It's all true, I stated, my voice clear. Justin's been involved in illegal organ trafficking and bribery. I have all the evidence. Richard hung up the phone. The attorney is on his way. Until then, Justin, you need to start explaining yourself. Justin flinched. Dad, it's more complicated than you think. I didn't have a choice. Choice? You always have a choice, Richard fired back, and you chose crime. Evelyn sobbed quietly, holding her forehead. This can't be happening. How could you do this to your patients, to us? Justin clenched his fists, his facade of control entirely shattered. It wasn't just for money, he said, his voice hollow. Some of these people were desperate. Lives were saved. And how many lives were ruined? I retorted, locking eyes with him. You think your good intentions justify breaking the law? Exploiting people? Richard raised a hand. Eva's right. Whatever your reasoning, it doesn't excuse this. Justin's gaze shifted around the room, looking for an ally, but finding none. Dad, Mom, please, I can make this right. Just give me a chance. No, Justin, Richard said quietly. You must take responsibility for this. Our family name is at stake, and more importantly, you need to atone for your actions. A tense silence filled the room as Justin seemed to crumple under the weight of his father's words. It was strange seeing this once powerful man now cornered and vulnerable. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. Richard glanced at me, nodding for confirmation. That must be the attorney. I opened the door to find not just the family attorney, but also a police officer standing beside him. Wordlessly, I stepped back to let them in. "Richard," the attorney said, shaking hands and nodding solemnly at Evelyn. "I've briefed the officer about the situation." Justin's eyes widened in panic. "Dad, you called the police?" "I had to," Richard said firmly, though his voice softened slightly. "It's the right thing to do." The officer stepped forward. "Justin Parker, you're under arrest for your involvement in illegal organ trafficking and bribery. You have the right to remain silent." Justin looked at his parents one last time, desperation in his eyes. "Please, help me." Evelyn's tears flowed freely, but she said nothing. Richard sighed deeply. "We'll get you a lawyer, Justin, but you must face the consequences." As the officer pulled out the handcuffs, Justin didn't resist. His eyes found mine, pleading silently, but I felt no pity. This was justice. "I'm done being your victim, Justin. Now, the world knows who you really are," I said quietly, feeling the weight of the last few months lift off my shoulders. As they led Justin away, Evelyn collapsed into Richard's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He held her, his face a mix of heartbreak and resolve. "You did the right thing," Richard said, looking at me. "No one should have to live in fear or be treated like that. Thank you for your courage." I nodded, unable to form words. Justice was messy, and hearts were broken, but it was a necessary step. I had exposed the truth, and in doing so had freed myself from Justin's cruel grip. Outside, as the police car pulled away, I watched with a strange sense of peace. Justin had been powerful and ruthless, but now he was simply a man facing the consequences of his actions. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. The media frenzy hit like a hurricane the day after Justin's arrest. Reporters swarmed our apartment building, their cameras flashing as they peppered me with questions. "Eva, how long did you know? What did you uncover? How do you feel now that it's all out in the open?" "I'm done being your victim, Justin. Now the world knows who you really are," I had said, and it was now more true than ever. As I looked at the chaos around me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Justice would be served, even if it was a messy process. A police officer managed to clear a path for me. "Eva Hall, Detective Mills would like to speak with you." "Thank you," I replied, following the officer to an unmarked car parked discreetly around the corner. Detective Sarah Mills was waiting inside, her expression unreadable. She motioned for me to sit. "Eva, I need to hear everything from the beginning. What you found, how you found it, all of it." I took a seat, my heart still pounding from the chaos outside. "I found Justin's emails," I began. "He'd been encrypting messages about illegal organ trades and bribes. I took photos of everything." Detective Mills nodded. "We've reviewed the evidence you provided and begun our investigation. Thanks to you, we're already making progress on tracking down his accomplices." A sense of relief washed over me. What happens now? Now we gather more evidence and prepare the case against him. It's going to be a long process, Eva. Are you ready for that? I took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm ready. I've come this far. I won't back down now." Detective Mills smiled faintly. "Good. You've done an incredible thing, Eva. Not many people would have had the courage to do what you did." I nodded, determined. "Thank you, Detective." We spent the next few hours going over the details, piece by piece. It was exhausting, reliving each painful discovery, but I knew it was necessary. By the time we finished, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the chaotic scene outside. Finally, outside, I glanced at the dispersing crowd of reporters, realizing it was time to reclaim my life. I walked back to our apartment, every step solidifying my resolve. That evening, I called my mom. "Hey, Mom, it's over. Justin's been arrested." Her relief was palpable. "I'm so proud of you, Eva. You've been so strong." "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, my voice breaking a little. "It's been hard, but it was worth it." "Come home, sweetheart," she replied, her voice warm. "We can start over together." "I'll be there soon, Mom." As I packed up my belongings, the emptiness of the apartment struck me. This place, once filled with promise and love, now held only bitter memories and broken dreams. I had to leave it all behind to truly move forward. The next morning, I woke up early, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. I looked around the apartment one last time before stepping out the door with my bags. Outside, the air was crisp, and the world seemed strangely quiet, without the buzz of media frenzy. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'm done being your victim, Justin, I whispered to myself as I walked to my car. Now, it's time to live my life. As I drove away, the city skyline faded into the distance, along with the chaos that had consumed my life for so long. There was a long road ahead, full of uncertainty and challenges, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it. I arrived at my mom's place, a sense of peace filling me as she welcomed me with open arms. I hugged her tightly, knowing that together we could rebuild our lives. This was just the beginning. Justice had been served, and now it was time to find a new path, one filled with hope, strength, and a future I could finally control. Freedom tastes a little bittersweet, but it's mine, I thought, standing in the doorway of my mother's house. A wave of calm washed over me, something I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. "Eva, come inside," Mom called, her voice warm and comforting. "Dinner's almost ready." Walking into the kitchen, I was struck by how different this felt compared to the cold, tense atmosphere of the apartment I had shared with Justin. Here, everything smelled of home, of safety and love. "How are you holding up?" Mom asked, setting a pot of soup on the table. "Better," I said, helping her set the table. "It's strange, but I feel like I can breathe again." She smiled, wrapping me in a hug. "We'll get through this together." I felt a sudden swell of gratitude for her support. "Thanks, Mom, for everything." Over the next few weeks, life began to take on a new rhythm. I found part-time work at a local cafe, much less stressful than the multiple jobs I juggled before. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and allowed me to care for Mom. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Evelyn. "Eva, I wanted to apologize for everything. We had no idea what Justin was capable of." "Thank you, Evelyn," I replied, surprised by her call. "I'm just glad the truth is finally out." "We'd like to help if you'll let us," she continued. "Financially, emotionally, whatever you need." I hesitated. Accepting their help felt complicated, yet I knew it would make things easier. "I appreciate it. Let's take it one step at a time." Days turned into weeks, and I visited Justin's parents occasionally. Despite everything, they offered genuine support, wanting to right the wrongs their son had committed. Evelyn even helped care for Mom sometimes, her presence a comfort we hadn't expected. One evening, Richard showed up with a somber expression. "Eva, I wanted to tell you that we've arranged a fund for you and Sharon. It's the least we can do." Tears welled up in my eyes. This gesture overwhelmed me. "Thank you, Richard. This means more than you know." He nodded, his face reflecting the weight of his own family's crisis. "We owe it to you." Despite the challenges, a sense of justice and closure began to fill the void left by Justin's abuse. With each contribution from Evelyn and Richard, our lives became a little less burdened. It was a strange alliance forged out of mutual tragedy and need for forgiveness. One night, as I tucked Mom into bed, she grabbed my hand. "I'm so proud of you, Eva. You've done so much for us." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "Thanks, Mom. I just want us to be happy." The news covered Justin's court trial extensively. Watching from our living room, I saw him being sentenced. There he was, the man who had tried to tear me down, now paying for his crimes. Freedom indeed tasted bittersweet, but justice was powerful. As days turned into months, I found strength I never knew I had. My job at the cafe became more stable, providing a steady income that allowed me more time with Mom. Her health remained fragile, but our bond grew deeper every day. Evelyn and Richard's continued support transformed from financial help to genuine friendship. We had become unlikely allies in the aftermath of a shared catastrophe. One weekend, as I sat with Mom on the porch, enjoying the cool breeze, she looked at me with a smile. "What do you see for your future, Eva?" I paused, considering her question. "I'm not sure yet, but for now I see us together, happy and free from the past." She nodded, her eyes reflecting pride. "That sounds just right to me." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The broken promise from my past had led me to a new beginning, one filled with resilience, determination, and love. And for the first time, I could truly see a brighter future, a future that was mine to build, step by step. "Bradley, what is this? Again?" "You're not listening to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Bradley barely glanced up from his phone. "Why should I? You're not my mom. I don't have to listen to you." His words stung, but I forced myself to stay steady. I had been married to Sean for 4 years now, and dealing with Bradley's rebellion had become a daily struggle. Sean's mother, Carol, standing in the doorway, watched the exchange without a word, her expression one of mild amusement. "Bradley, this isn't about me being your mom. It's about respect," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Whatever," he muttered, grabbing his backpack and heading for the door. I sighed and turned to Carol. "Can you please help me with him, Carol? He needs boundaries." "He's a teenager, Valerie," Carol said dismissively. "You need to give him some space." Bradley slammed the door on his way out, and I flinched. Carol looked at me like I was the one at fault. Every day felt like a battle, and I was losing. Later, Sean walked in from work, dropping his keys on the kitchen counter. "Hey, Val, what's for dinner?" I sighed. "I was thinking of leftovers, Sean. We need to start saving money. Bradley's demands and Carol's shopping are getting out of hand." Sean frowned. "Val, we've been over this. They're my family. We can't just change how things are overnight." "No," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "But we have to start somewhere. I can't keep doing this alone." "You're overreacting. Stop worrying so much. We'll manage," Sean said dismissively. I turned away, frustrated. I felt more like a maid than part of this family, juggling the household finances and trying to make ends meet. Even with my job, covering the endless expenses was impossible when no one else seemed to care. That evening, I found Carol reclining in the living room, surrounded by shopping bags. "Did you go shopping again?" I asked, unable to hide the irritation in my voice. Carol looked up, unbothered. "Just a few things. Bradley needed new shoes, and I saw a nice jacket for him." "Carol, we can't afford this. We're already struggling to pay the bills," I said. "We'll be fine, Valerie. Don't be so dramatic," she replied. As I tried to argue, Sean stepped in. "What's the problem now? We can't keep spending like this, Sean. It's not sustainable." He looked tired. "You're always making a big deal out of everything. Just let it go." I felt a wave of anger and helplessness wash over me. How could they not see what was happening? The next morning, I tried speaking to Bradley again before he left for school. "Bradley, we need to talk about your attitude and spending habits." "Leave me alone," he said, pushing past me. The door slammed shut again. In the quiet of the house, I sat down, feeling the weight of it all pressing on me. If something didn't change soon, I would break. As I looked around the house, filled with things we didn't need and couldn't afford, a sinking realization set in. I was invisible here, and my words fell on deaf ears. I stood up and walked to the little home office where I kept the bills. It was time to stop talking and start doing something about this mess. The next morning, as I placed a plate of scrambled eggs in front of Bradley, he gave me a disdainful look. "I'm not eating that," he said, pushing the plate away. "It's perfectly good food, Bradley. We can't afford to be wasteful," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I'm not eating leftovers," he snapped. "Why can't we ever have something fresh?" Just then, Carol walked into the kitchen. "Bradley, darling, you don't have to eat that if you don't want to. We can go out for breakfast," she said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Carol, we can't keep spending money like this," I said firmly. "We need to be more responsible." She dismissed my concerns with a wave. "You worry too much, Valerie. We'll be fine." Frustration bubbled up inside me. "No, we won't be fine. We need to start cutting back now. Our financial situation is serious." Carol smirked. "You're overreacting. Sean will take care of everything. He always does." I wanted to scream. Later, Sean walked in and I seized the moment. "Sean, we need to talk about the spending. Carol and Bradley are not listening. This can't go on." Sean sighed, looking weary. "Can we talk about this later, Val? It's too early for arguments." I grabbed a stack of bills from the counter. "No, we need to talk now. Look at these. We're drowning and no one is helping." He glanced at the bills, then back at me. "Val, you stress too much. We'll get through it." "How, Sean? By ignoring the problem and hoping it goes away? We need to set limits, and it starts with Bradley and Carol." He rubbed his temples. "I'm tired, Val. Just let it go for now." Fuming, I left the kitchen, feeling more isolated than ever. No one was listening. That evening, I tried to talk to Bradley again while he was playing video games. "Bradley, can we talk?" He didn't even pause the game. "About what? How you're going to tell me to stop having fun?" "This isn't about fun, Bradley. It's about responsibility. We need to work together as a family." "Whatever, Valerie," he said, eyes glued to the screen. Bradley, this is serious. We need to make changes. Your behavior affects everyone. He finally looked at me, irritation clear on his face. I'm not changing for you. Deal with it. As I walked away, I passed Carol, who had been listening. You need to stop pushing him, Valerie. You're making things worse. I'm trying to help. We can't keep pretending everything is fine. You're the one causing problems, she said coldly before turning away. The days passed and the tension in the house grew thicker. One afternoon, I found Carol in the living room, arranging a pile of shopping bags. Carol, more shopping? We've talked about this. She shrugged, not bothered. Bradley needed new clothes. He's a growing boy. That we can't afford new clothes constantly. There are more important things we need to focus on. Sean said it's fine, she replied nonchalantly. Infuriated, I cornered Sean that night after dinner. Sean, enough is enough. We need to set boundaries. He looked exhausted and annoyed. What do you want me to do, Val? They won't listen to you, and they won't listen to me either. Then we'll sink. Is that what you want? I asked, my voice trembling. Sean didn't have an answer. As I watched him retreat into silence, something broke inside me. If they wouldn't change, maybe it was time I did. Ever since our last argument, a heavy silence filled the house. That silence broke when I walked into the living room one afternoon and saw Bradley tearing open a large box. What's that? I asked, already dreading the answer. Bradley's eyes lit up. A new gaming console. Grandma bought it for me. My heart sank. How could Carol keep doing this? I turned to find her standing in the doorway, her expression smug. Carol, we cannot keep buying expensive things. We have bills to pay. Carol crossed her arms. Valerie, it's a small gift. Bradley's been having a hard time. He deserves something nice. We can't afford nice right now, Carol. You know that. Don't be such a stick in the mud, Valerie. He's just a kid. I was furious. Enough, Carol. This kind of spending is sinking us. Sean walked in just as I was about to snap. What's going on? Carol bought Bradley a new gaming console, I said, shaking with anger. Sean rubbed his forehead. Val, can we not fight over this? Let's talk about it later. There's nothing to talk about, Sean. We need to make changes now. This isn't sustainable. He sighed, looking between Carol and me. We'll figure it out. I stormed out of the room, feeling utterly defeated. They were never going to change, and I was hitting a wall every single time. The next morning, I decided to take action. I waited until Bradley left for school and Carol went out shopping. Then I sat Sean down at the kitchen table. Sean, we need to make some serious changes. This is out of control, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. Valerie, I know you're struggling, but what do you expect me to do? He asked, exasperated. You need to start supporting me. Put your foot down with Carol and Bradley. We need to budget and stick to it. I'll talk to them, he said warily, but I had heard that before. No, Sean, you need to do more than talk. You need to enforce it, I said firmly. He looked at me for a long moment. I'll try, he finally said. But try wasn't enough. The following week, nothing changed. Carol continued her shopping sprees, and Bradley kept getting what he wanted. I felt like I was sinking into quicksand. Then, one evening, I overheard Carol talking to a friend on the phone. Valerie's always nagging about money. She needs to relax. Sean will take care of everything like he always does. That was the last straw. I waited until she hung up before confronting her. Carol, enough is enough. You can't keep treating this situation lightly. We need to stop this reckless spending. Carol looked at me with contempt. Valerie, you're overstepping. Who do you think you are? This is my son's house. It's my house, too, and I have a say in how we manage it. Sean's in charge, and he'll make the decisions. Not you, she said, glaring at me. I turned to Sean, who had been standing silently in the doorway. Are you going to let her speak for you? He looked uncomfortable. Val, let's just calm down. We can talk about this. No, Sean. We've talked enough. This has to stop now. Carol smirked. See, Sean? Valerie's just causing trouble. I felt the walls closing in. Without more support from Sean, nothing would change. It was up to me to decide what my breaking point was and what I was willing to tolerate. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made up my mind. Sean might not back me up, but I had to stand my ground. This cycle had to end, one way or another. The tension in the house reached a boiling point the next morning. Carol was in the kitchen, humming softly to herself as she brewed coffee. Bradley was shoveling cereal into his mouth, ignoring me as usual. I took a deep breath and walked over to the coffee machine. Carol, we need to talk. She glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. What now, Valerie? I kept my voice steady. This can't go on. The spending, the disrespect, we're in a financial crisis and no one is listening. Valerie, is this really necessary? You're blowing things out of proportion, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I'm not, I said firmly. Sean and I have talked, and we need to make some drastic changes. Carol scoffed. Talked? He'll come to his senses like he always does. You can't change how we live. Actually, I can, I replied. I'm not moving into the new house. This has gone too far. I've had enough. The room went silent. Even Bradley looked up from his cereal. You can't be serious, Carol said, her voice rising. Sean, tell her she's being ridiculous. Sean stood in the doorway, looking helpless. Val, are you sure this is what you want? I nodded. I've thought about it, Sean. I'm done enabling this behavior. I need a break from all of this. You can't just leave, Bradley said, standing up. Who's going to handle everything? This I'm sure you'll manage, I replied, keeping my voice calm. Sean stepped forward. Valerie, we're a family. You can't just walk out. Watch me, I said. The determination in my voice surprised even me. That night, I packed my bags. Every creak of the suitcase zipper sounded louder in the quiet house. Sean came into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Val, please reconsider. We can make things better. I've given it 4 years. Nothing's changed. I need to take care of myself now. How can you do this to us? To me? His voice broke, and for a moment I saw the vulnerability in his eyes that I'd fallen in love with. But it wasn't enough to hold me back this time. I'm doing this for me, Sean. I need space, and I need peace. With my bags packed, I stood at the door. Bradley stormed past me, his face twisted with anger. You're just a quitter, he spat. I ignored the sting of his words and walked out, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. In the new apartment, the silence was different. Peaceful, almost welcoming. As the days went by, I started to find a rhythm, a sense of self that had been lost in the chaos. Back at the old house, things began to unravel. I received a call from Sean late one evening. Valerie, we need you. Things are falling apart here. His voice was laced with panic. You need to handle it, Sean. I've done my part. Please, can you at least think about coming back? I can't, Sean. You need to face the consequences of your choices. I need to move on. As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I slept soundly, knowing I had finally taken control of my life. I closed the door to my new apartment with a sense of resolve. The place was small but clean, a blank canvas ready for a fresh start. I began to unpack my life, each item a reminder of what I had left behind. Sean's calls were increasingly desperate. Val, we can't manage without you. The bills are piling up. The house is a mess, he confessed during one of our conversations. Sean, you need to step up. I can't keep saving you. I replied firmly. Weeks turned into months, and I settled into a new routine. I found solace in the simplicity of my new life. Carol's incessant calls were easy to ignore, each one more shrill and panic-stricken than the last. One morning, while I sipped my coffee, I received a knock on the door. Opening it, I was surprised to see Bradley standing there, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen him. Bradley, what are you doing here? I asked, keeping my surprise in check. I need help, he mumbled, looking at his feet. Come in, I said, stepping aside. He shuffled in, looking around the small, tidy apartment. This place, it's different. It's mine, I replied simply. Now what's going on? Things are bad at home. Grandma's health isn't great, and Dad, he's just not handling it, Bradley said, his voice cracking. Bradley, you know I can't go back. I needed to make a change. I know, but we're drowning. Dad's been laid off and Grandma had to sell the house. We're living in an apartment now, but it's not enough. I dropped out of school to work. I felt a pang of sympathy, but kept my expression neutral. Bradley, that's not the answer. You need to take responsibility, but not like this. He looked at me, eyes pleading. What should I do then? How do I fix this? You start from the bottom, Bradley. Get a job, finish your education, and understand what it means to be responsible. It takes time, but it's the only way. I know I treated you horribly. I was wrong. I need to make things right, but I don't know how, he confessed, tears welling up in his eyes. You took the first step by coming here. The rest is up to you. If you need guidance, I'm here. But I won't solve your problems for you. Bradley nodded, wiping his eyes. Thanks, Valerie. I'll work on it. As he left, I felt a strange sense of closure. The boy who had once been my greatest source of frustration was now seeking my guidance. It wasn't revenge I wanted, but change, and it seemed like it was finally starting to happen. Later that evening, I picked up my phone and dialed Sean. Hey, we need to talk. Val, I miss you. We need you. I need you. His voice was barely above a whisper. I can't come back, Sean, but I wanted to check in. How's Bradley? He's trying. He's working and planning to go back to school. I think your leaving was a wake-up call for all of us. I'm glad to hear that, but Sean, you need to learn to manage without me. I know, I'm learning, slowly, but I am. As I hung up, I felt a sense of accomplishment. My departure had forced change, real change. It wasn't instant, but it was happening. A small smile crept onto my face. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time I felt like I had made a real difference. As weeks turned into months, I heard less from Sean and more about their struggles through mutual friends. It seemed reality had finally caught up with them. One evening, I got a call from an old friend who had run into Sean at the grocery store. Valerie, I saw Sean today. He looked terrible, asked if you knew he lost his job, she said. The news hit me, but I stayed calm. Thanks for letting me know. How's Bradley? Doing his best. From what Sean said, working part-time and trying to finish school, she replied. Good to hear, I said, trying to mask my concern. The next day I got a call from Sean himself. His voice was strained. Valerie, things have gotten worse. I don't know what to do. What happened, Sean? I got laid off, Val. We can't keep up with the expenses. Carol's health is declining and Bradley's trying, but it's not enough, he said, defeat ringing in his tone. This was never supposed to happen, he continued. I thought we could handle this. Sean, you have to take control. Talk to your mother. Set boundaries. It's the only way. But she won't listen to me. She never did. She has to now, or you'll all suffer the consequences, I replied firmly. I'll try, he said, though he didn't sound convinced. Time passed and the storm continued to rage at their end. One evening I decided to take a walk. Fresh air always cleared my mind. As I passed by my old neighborhood, I saw Bradley working at the local car wash. He looked worn out but focused. Hey, Bradley, I called out. He looked up, surprised but pleased to see me. Valerie, hey. How's it going? I asked, genuinely curious. It's tough, he admitted, but I'm managing, trying to save up and finish high school. I'm proud of you for sticking it out, I said. Thank you, he replied, gratitude in his eyes. I realized I took a lot for granted. I should have listened to you sooner. It's never too late to change, I said. Keep working hard and things will get better. He nodded, determination etched on his face. I will. Walking back, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. I cared for them, but I also knew they needed this struggle to truly understand the value of responsibility. A few nights later, I received another call from Sean. This time, his tone was desperate. Val, Carol's health is really bad. We had to sell the house and move into a small apartment. It's all falling apart. I'm sorry to hear that, Sean. You two made choices that led to this, I said, trying to stay firm but compassionate. Can you help, Val? Please. I don't know what else to do, he pleaded. You need to face this, Sean. Learn from it. I see that now. I see how much we relied on you, but it's too late, he said softly. You can still turn things around. Focus on Bradley and make things right with him. I will. Thank you, Val. As we ended the call, I realized their downfall was the wake-up call they needed. It was painful to see them struggle, but necessary for true change. They had to experience the consequences of their actions to learn and grow. Despite the chaos, I felt a sense of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter for all of us, one filled with hard-earned lessons and the promise of a better future. I was in the middle of organizing my apartment when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer it, but the name on the screen caught my eye. Sean. Valerie, I hate to ask, but I really need your help, he said, voice strained. What happened now? I asked, bracing myself. We're being evicted. I don't know where else to turn. He admitted. I took a deep breath. Sean, you ignored my warnings for years. Why do you expect me to help now? Please, Val, I've realized how much you did for us. We can't manage without you. You chose to ignore me, Sean. You need to face the consequences. But what about Bradley? He needs stability, he pleaded. I closed my eyes, considering. Bradley is trying to make things right, but you have to lead by example, Sean. I'll do anything. Just help us get back on our feet, he said, desperation clear in his voice. I'll think about it, but understand this, Sean, I won't be your crutch anymore. We hung up, and I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to rush in and fix everything, but I knew that wouldn't help them in the long run. A week later, I got another call from Sean. Valerie, we've found a small place we can afford, but I need a loan for the deposit. Can you help? Sean, I'll lend you the money, but this is the last time. You have to make a plan and stick to it. I promise, Val. This time will be different. We arranged to meet at a cafe to finalize the loan. As I arrived, I saw Sean sitting at a corner table, looking more worn than I'd ever seen him. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down. I'm doing this for Bradley, I replied. Sean nodded. I understand. We'll pay you back, I swear. I handed him the check. Make sure you do, and start taking responsibility. Bradley needs you to be strong. I know, I will. Thank you, Val, he said sincerely. As I left the cafe, I hoped this would be the turning point for them. Days passed, and I focused on my own life. One afternoon, I received a call from Bradley. Valerie, can we meet? I have something to show you. Curious, I agreed. We met at a small park. Bradley looked healthier, more focused. Look, he said, showing me a report card. I passed all my classes. I'm graduating next month. Bradley, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you, I said, genuinely happy. Thanks, Valerie. I couldn't have done it without your guidance. You did the hard work, Bradley. Keep it up. As we sat and talked, I realized how much he had grown. He was maturing into a responsible young man. How's Sean? I asked. He's trying. He's working 2 jobs now and managing the finances better. Good to hear. Stay on track, both of you. We will, Valerie. We've learned a lot from this, he said. Walking back to my apartment, I felt a sense of closure. They were finally learning from their mistakes, and I had played my part. A few weeks later, I got another call from Sean. Val, I wanted you to know we've paid the first month's rent on time. Things are looking up. I'm glad to hear that, Sean. Keep it up. I will. Thank you for everything. As the call ended, I felt a sense of peace. My decision to leave had been the catalyst for real change. While they still had a long way to go, they were finally on the right path. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe easy, knowing I had made the right choices for myself and, indirectly, for them as well. A few months passed, and life carried on without much contact from Sean and Bradley. One day, while returning from the grocery store, my phone buzzed with a message from Bradley. Valerie, can you meet me at the park? Need to talk. I agreed, curious and maybe a little concerned. When I arrived, I found Bradley sitting alone on a bench, a somber look on his face. What's going on? I asked, taking a seat beside him. It's Grandma. She's not doing well. We had to sell her part of the house to pay for medical bills, he confessed, eyes downcast. I'm sorry to hear that, Bradley, I said sincerely. It's been really tough. Dad's trying, but he's stretched so thin. We're just surviving day by day. I placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. You've come a long way, Bradley. Don't lose hope. I know, it's just hard seeing everything fall apart. His voice broke. You've got to stay strong for yourself and for your dad. Thanks, Valerie. It means a lot to hear you say that. I'm always here if you need to talk, I reassured him. On my way home, I thought about Carol. She had never shown me kindness, but seeing her suffer now didn't bring me joy either. This was karma playing out in real life, teaching its harsh lessons. A week later, Sean called me. His voice was weary. Val, it's Carol. She's bedridden now, and we have to move her to a care facility. We can't handle her medical needs. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, trying to balance empathy with my own emotional distance. Any advice on what we can do? Look into community resources. There are programs that can help you manage financially and medically. I will. Thanks, Val. I appreciate it, he said, his voice sincere. A month later, as I was strolling through town, I ran into an old neighbor who told me Carol had moved into a small apartment near the care facility. The news left me feeling a strange mix of vindication and pity. One rainy afternoon, I stopped by the local diner for a coffee. As I entered, I saw Bradley cleaning tables. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. Valerie, hey. Hey, Bradley. How's it going? Better. Dad got a more stable job, and I'm working here part-time while finishing high school. I'm glad to hear that. Keep working hard. I will. Thanks for everything, Val, he said earnestly. As I left the diner, I bumped into Sean. He looked older, more worn, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Valerie, he said, his tone softer than I remembered. Sean, I replied, keeping my emotions in check. I wanted to thank you. Your leaving made us wake up. We're still struggling, but at least we're trying now. I'm glad to hear that. You know, Sean, it's never too late to change. He nodded. We're learning that the hard way. As we stood there, the rain pouring around us, I felt the closure I had longed for finally settling in. The Turner family had learned their lessons through the trials they'd faced, and while it had been a difficult journey, it was clear they were on a path to redemption. Take care, Sean, I said, turning to leave. You too, Val, he replied, his voice carrying a sense of genuine appreciation. Walking away, I felt lighter. The drama and chaos that once filled my life had dissipated, leaving room for new beginnings. Bradley's growth, Sean's newfound responsibility, and even Carol's change of circumstances were all part of the greater tapestry of life's lessons learned. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace, knowing my decisions had steered not just me, but all of us towards a better future.